Chapter 734. It was obvious that the elders of the sect were racking their brains to plot against the human emperor. However, as a junior, Enchanting was actually helping the enemy. He kept pulling them back and creating difficulties for their plan. Was that appropriate? Obviously not. There's nothing to explain about that. Even if the poor way doesn't let the junior brothers do it, someone else will take over the matter of building a teleportation system for the human race. In the end, it will be done by the human emperor and become his merit. Since the outcome is already decided and we can't change anything, why can't the disciples of the GS school complete this matter of great merit? It's better to let the disciples of the GS school benefit than to let outsiders benefit, right? Since Enchanting dared to let the disciples of the GS school go to the human race to help, he must have thought of an excuse in advance. He would not let anyone catch him. Just as Enchanting had said, the matter of the human emperor building a teleportation system for the human race was a foregone conclusion. Outsiders could not change or destroy it. The karma of destroying great merit was so strong that ordinary people could not bear it. Because they could obtain merit, if the disciples of the GS school did not go, there would be plenty of people in the primordial world. The human emperor did not have to worry about not being able to build a teleportation system. If the disciples of the GS school did not go, it would not affect the human emperor's plan. Instead, it would cause them to miss out on merit. Since that was the case, why should the disciples of the GS school go? If they went, they would only make the Grand Master of Heaven feel uncomfortable, but they would be able to benefit these disciples. However, if they did not go, these disciples would not be able to get anything. Sigh. I already know senior brother's intentions, but it's not easy to explain to Master. Duobao sighed and said helplessly. Since he had already said so much, he had nothing to say. What could he do? Continue to blame Enchanting? It didn't make sense. Enchanting's words were already very clear. What he did just now was completely selfless. He was thinking for his junior brothers and sisters. It was really impossible to blame him. Junior brother, don't worry. If Master blames me, I will bear it alone. I won't implicate those junior brothers and sisters. Compared to the safety of those junior brothers and sisters, so what if the poor way is punished by Master? Either way, the poor way won't die. However, if those junior brothers and sisters die in the tribulation, they will truly die. Seeing how worried Duobao was, Enchanting comforted him instead. He was not afraid of being punished by the sect leader of Tongtian. If the sect leader of Tongtian punished him because of this, wouldn't his disciples' heart turn cold? Therefore, even if the sect leader of Tongtian came back, there was a high chance that he would not punish him. In fact, he would even praise him. How could a master have the heart to punish a senior martial brother who loved his junior martial brother so much? One had to know that this was the primordial world, not the future. The status of a direct disciple was not inferior to that of a biological son. In fact, it was even slightly higher. The relationship between orthodoxies was much more stable than the relationship between bloodlines. Senior brother, you, hearing this, Duobao was completely moved. He felt a strong sense of guilt in his heart. His senior martial brother had done so much for his junior martial brothers and sisters, but he still suspected that his senior martial brother's true purpose was to help his good friend, the Emperor, attain the Tao. How despicable was that? When he thought of how well Enchanting treated him, the guilt in Duobao's heart grew even stronger. He bowed deeply to Enchanting and said sincerely, Duobao is here to thank senior martial brother on behalf of my junior martial brothers and sisters. If Master wants to punish senior martial brother after he returns, I will plead for senior martial brother even if I have to risk my life. Duobao's bow could be said to be a display of his true feelings. His words came from the bottom of his heart. He was really moved by Enchanting's actions. Junior martial brother, please get up. There's no need for this between you and me. Enchanting said emotionally as he stepped forward to help Duobao up. At this moment, not to mention Duobao, even he was moved by himself. As the eldest senior martial brother of the celestial sect of wonders, he was really too perfect. It could be said that he was worried about the future of his junior martial brothers and sisters. There was no other person like him in the entire primordial world. How could one not be moved by such a scene? That's not right. At this moment, Qianqing suddenly realized that as the eldest senior martial brother of the celestial sect of wonders, he was not perfect enough. Since he was the eldest senior martial brother of the celestial sect of wonders, he definitely could not only care about Jie school. Chan school should also help him a little. Only then could he match his character. Therefore, he had to help the disciples of Chan school. Otherwise, it would inevitably make the heavenly lord of primordial beginning unhappy. Thinking of this, Qianqing suddenly said to Duobao, who was beside him, "Junior martial brother, is there anything else? If there's nothing else, why don't you follow me to meet the junior martial brothers of Chan school?" Hearing that, Duobao could not help but frown. Unlike Qianqing, as the eldest disciple of Jie school, his relationship with the disciples of Chan school was not very good. "Senior martial brother, why are you meeting them? One or two of them. They're not big, but they're quite arrogant. They didn't learn anything about second Uncle Master's ability, but they learned his temper completely. They look down on this and that all day long. They're very arrogant. In the end, senior martial brother, look. Didn't they provoke someone they can't afford to offend? Not only were they tortured to death, but they also triggered the immortal god-killing tribulation and implicated all the disciples of the heaven immortal Tao. Why are you meeting such people? You're making yourself angry for nothing." Speaking of the disciples of Chan school, Duobao was full of anger and complained to Qianqing. "Junior martial brother, calm down. No matter how many mistakes they have, they're still our junior martial brothers. We can't treat them as enemies. As for why senior martial brother wants to see them, it's naturally to save them. The immortal god-killing tribulation has descended. The disciples of Jie school are not the only ones who have entered the tribulation. There's also the disciple of Chan school. Poor Wei, as a senior martial brother, since he has already arranged a way out for Jie school, he can't be biased. He has to make plans for the disciples of Chan school." Shaking his head, Qianqing said. "What? Senior martial brother wants to plan for the disciples of Chan school?" As soon as Qianqing finished speaking, Duobao exclaimed in disbelief. Even his tone changed as if he had been greatly shocked. "That's right." Qianqing nodded and said affirmatively. Then, he used his divine ability and summoned the disciples of Chan school to see him. As the eldest senior martial brother of the Xian sect, Qianqing naturally had the means to contact all the disciples of the Xian sect. That was the privilege given to him by the Tao ancestor. Duobao frowned and was about to say something, but before he could speak, Qianqing glared at him fiercely. Seeing this, even if Duobao was dissatisfied, he did not dare to say anything. In just a few days, the disciples of Chan school came together and rushed to Penglai Immortal Island. Qianqing personally went out of the island to welcome them. When Duobao saw that, he naturally followed closely behind. However, as soon as they saw the people of Chan school, Qianqing and Duobao frowned. There was no other reason. The disciples of Chan school were not all here. 2 of them were not here. One of the 12 golden immortals of Chan school was missing. The great Taoist master Numinous Treasure did not come. The in-name disciples of the heavenly lord of primordial beginning were also missing one person. The old man of the South Pole did not come. Seeing this, the faces of the 2 people who had rushed over excitedly darkened. If not for Qianqing holding him back, Duobao would have scolded him. "Greetings, eldest senior brother." "Greetings, senior brother Duobao." The disciples of Chan school were also a little embarrassed. After greeting the 2 of them, they did not say anything else. "Why aren't the great Taoist master Lingbao and the old man of the South Pole here?" Qianqing asked Guang Qingzi with a dark face. He was angry, but he did not even call him junior martial brother. He directly called him by his name. This eldest senior martial brother, the 2 junior martial brothers are seriously injured and can't go far. Please forgive us, Guangqingzi was still thinking about his junior martial brother, so he spoke up for them. However, before he could finish, he was stared at by Qianqing's cold gaze and could not continue. In the poor Wei's opinion, they just don't want to come. They don't take senior martial brother seriously at all. What serious injuries? How can they be injured on Mount Kunlun? At the side, Duobao shouted with a displeased expression. Hearing that, Qianqing's gaze became even colder, causing Guangqingzi to break out in cold sweat. Guangqingzi, tell me the truth. Why didn't they come? Don't lie to me. You should know what I'm capable of. Senior martial brother's pre-celestial divination was taught by senior martial uncle. Staring at Guangqingzi, Qianqing asked word by word. This, under Qianqing's gaze, Guangqingzi felt a lot of pressure. He did not know how to answer. He could not tell the truth. The great Taoist master Numinous Treasure had always hated Qianqing because he was punished by the heavenly lord of primordial beginning back then. Therefore, he found an excuse not to come when Qianqing summoned him. As for the old man of the South Pole, after his identity as the Khanate star god was abolished, he was a little depressed and could not raise his spirits about anything. Therefore, he did not come. The old man of the South Pole was fine, but the great Taoist master Numinous Treasure was a little troublesome. If he told the truth, would Qianqing let him go? Junior martial brother South Pole's Dao heart was injured and has been in seclusion. As for junior martial brother Numinous Treasure, he is, at this point, Guangqingzi could not continue. However, even if he did not say it, Qianqing had calculated the reason why the great Taoist master Numinous Treasure did not come. Humph. What a great Taoist master Numinous Treasure. Poor Wei did not care about his disrespect to me. Instead, he hated poor Wei. Such a narrow-minded person will have to go to the investiture of the gods. Furious, Qianqing wanted to kill him and send the great Taoist master Numinous Treasure to the investiture of the gods. After all, he was the former celestial emperor. The moment Qianqing killed him, the heavenly Tao sensed it. One could see that the name of the great Taoist master Numinous Treasure faintly appeared on the investiture of the gods. Qianqing's words determined the fate of the great Taoist master Numinous Treasure. However, it was true that no one knew about this because Feng Zichen, Hao Tian, and Lei Zhe had joined forces to set up layers of seals on the god rank roll, and it completely eliminated the possibility of others spying on it. Even the saints could not. After that, Qianqing flicked his sleeves and returned to the main hall. Although everyone was shocked, they only thought that Qianqing said it out of anger and did not take it to heart. Seeing Qianqing leave, they immediately followed. The human emperor needs a group of blacksmiths to refine a large number of spaceships for him to carry mortals to travel in the void passage. This is also a matter of merit. If it is done, you can share some merit to protect yourself in the killing tribulation. In that case, are you willing to go? In the hall, Qianqing suppressed the anger in his heart and said to the disciples of the Chan sect. The primeval Lord of Heaven was good at blacksmithing, and so were his disciples. All of them were blacksmithing masters. Especially Yun Zhongzi. If it were not for Feng Zichen, the title of the #1 forger in the primordial world would have fallen on his head. The spaceships refined by the disciples of the Chan sect would definitely meet all of Feng Zichen's requirements. Building a teleportation system for the human race was a merit. Refining a spaceship that matched it was also a merit. And this was the merit that Qianqing prepared for the disciples of the Chan sect. It was the most appropriate thing to leave the task of refining the spaceship to the disciples of the Chan sect. It just so happened that it could complement the disciples of the Jie sect. The two sects each had their own duties. The Jie sect specialized in setting up teleportation arrays, and the disciples of the Chan sect specialized in refining spaceships. They did not interfere with each other, and they could obtain merit. In this way, Qianqing also seemed to be impartial. It could be said that it was the best of both worlds. To be honest, Qianqing's plan was really perfect. If he really succeeded, not only would he help Feng Zichen solve the problem, but also the three pure ones would not be able to find fault with him. Because what Qianqing did was for the future of the disciples of the two sections. It really made the three pure ones unable to find a place to vent their anger. As the senior brother, he cherished his junior brother so much. It's fine if you don't reward him, but you still want to punish him. What kind of logic is that? This, after Xianqing finished speaking, the disciples of the Chan sect could not help but hesitate. It would be a lie to say that they were not tempted. After all, merit was the biggest life-saving talisman for them now. But if they accepted it, it would be difficult to explain to their master. You don't have to worry about second uncle master's attitude. Since senior brother mentioned this matter, he will naturally bear all the consequences. Seeing that they were hesitating, Xianqing knew what they were thinking, so he vouched for them. This, Xianqing had already said so, but the disciples of the Chan sect still did not make up their minds. The influence of Heavenly Lord Yuanshi on them was still too great. Think about it carefully. If you are willing to take this merit, go to the ancestral land of the human race within 100 years. If you are not willing, pretend that senior brother did not mention this matter. Okay, you can go back. With that, Xianqing waved his hand and asked them to leave. They could slowly make a decision after going back. Xianqing was not surprised by their attitude. To be more precise, everything was under his control. If the disciples of the Chan sect listened to him like the disciples of the Jie sect, the three pure ones would not be separated. Xianqing was sure that even if he told the disciples of the Chan sect how to obtain merit, there would not be more than half of them who would go to the ancestral land of the human race. The disciples of the Chan sect had a different way of thinking from others. It was difficult for outsiders to understand. Only they could guess it. Xianqing could only guess roughly. At this time, there was a problem. Xianqing knew that he could not persuade the disciples of the Chan sect, so why did he do something useless? The answer was naturally that he was putting on a show. He was putting on a show for the three pure ones to play the role of a responsible senior brother. Moreover, he had worked hard to plan for the disciples of the Chan sect. Heavenly Lord Yuanshi naturally had to accept his kindness. As for whether the disciples of the Chan sect would accept his kindness, that was another matter. Chapter 735. In the ancestral land of the human race, after Feng Zichen sent away the disciples of Jie school, he welcomed the disciples of Chan school. Just as Xianqing had expected, not all the disciples of Chan school had arrived. Only 3 people came. Yun Zhongzi, perfected Huang Long, and perfected Lord Qingshu. Yun Zhongzi had attained the Tao in the Khanate White Cloud. He was a born perfected immortal. However, he became a disciple a little late. He entered after the 12 golden immortals. Therefore, although he was favored by the Heavenly Lord of primordial beginning, he was only accepted as an in-name disciple. Since he was an in-name disciple, he had much more freedom. He did not have to worry about the Heavenly Lord of primordial beginning like the 12 golden immortals of Chan school. Perfected Huang Long was from the dragon race. With Feng Zichen's identity as the grandson-in-law of the ancestral dragon, how could perfected Huang Long not come after hearing that he needed help? Feng Zichen did not expect the 2 of them to come. However, the arrival of perfected Lord Qingshu surprised him. To be honest, Feng Zichen had always suspected that perfected Lord Qingshu was the incarnation of the Grand Pure One. Look, even their names are so similar. Unfortunately, Feng Zichen could not find any evidence. However, it did not matter. Regardless of whether perfected Lord Qingshu was the incarnation of the Grand Pure One, it was not an important matter to Feng Zichen. At that moment, the most important thing was that they could help Feng Zichen. The refining techniques of the disciples of Chan school were unique in the primordial world. Especially Yun Zhongzi, who had obtained the true teachings of the Heavenly Lord of primordial beginning. With them around, the human spacecraft would definitely set sail successfully. After arranging the construction of the teleportation system and the specific matters of refining the spacecraft to the disciples of Jie school and Chan school, Feng Zichen did not care anymore. If they did not do these things well, they would ruin the reputation of the Heavenly Lord of primordial beginning and the Grand Master of Heaven. Therefore, Feng Zichen was not worried that they would deal with the matter. He could use them boldly. For the sake of saving face for primeval Lord of Heaven and Tong Tian, the disciples of both sects would try their best to complete the mission. There was no need for them to play tricks on such matters. Compared to tricking Feng Zichen, it was obvious that the dignity of the saints was more important. Tricking Feng Zichen would only delay him for some time at most. However, the price that the two sects had to pay was the reputation of Chan School and Jie School. This transaction was not worth it at all. The dignity of the saint and the reputation of the three sects were far more valuable than he had imagined. Saints were immortal and indestructible. What they cared about the most was their face. If you dared to embarrass them, they would dare to make you wish you were dead. Thinking about Di Jun Tai, because he looked down on Taoist Kundi, he ruthlessly humiliated him. In the end, he held a grudge in his heart and used the matter of the 10 golden crows to plot against him to death. From this, it could be seen how much importance the saint attached to his skin. Pass down my order. Gather all the Daluo Taoist priests of the human race and come to the human emperor's palace for a discussion. On this day, Feng Zichen's order suddenly came from the human emperor's palace, which had been peaceful for a long time. He wanted to gather all the Daluo Taoist priests of the human race. For a moment, the entire primordial world was alarmed. All the experts looked at the ancestral land of the human race and paid attention to the human emperor's movements. What was the human emperor doing? Ever since he entered the ancestral land of the human race, he had been living in seclusion and did not do anything. But now, he suddenly summoned all the Daluo Taoist priests of the human race to the human emperor's palace to see him. What was he doing? Was he going to sweep through the 10,000 races? Or was he going to start a war with the saints? Everyone could not help but look forward to the human emperor's next move. But what happened next made everyone a little dumbfounded. They did not have the mood to watch the show at all. Especially those who had a bad relationship with the human race, they were even more terrified. Because the human emperor gave an order. Everywhere in the primordial world, whether it was the heaven realm, the netherworld realm, or the human realm, there were boundless winds and clouds rolling. The great Tao rumbled and swept through the entire sky. That was the strange phenomenon of the Daluo Taoist priests traveling. One could see the Gochin imperial palace of the heavenly court, the land of extreme negative energy of the Yin court, the 7 stars prefecture of the East Sea, the 4 extremes, and the various famous mountains and rivers in the primordial world. There were Daluo Taoist priests of the human race who walked out and rushed to the ancestral land of the human race in response to the human emperor's order. If one counted carefully, there were no less than 500 Daluo Taoist priests rushing to the ancestral land of the human race. Hiss, seeing this scene, the mighty figures of the primordial world all gasped in their hearts. Was this the foundation of the human race? It was really too strong. They already had some of the aura of the magi and demons. They were worthy of being called the main characters of the world. Even the saints were shocked when they saw this scene. They had underestimated the human race. They had actually accumulated such a powerful strength silently. 500 Daluo Taoist priests. This power could really sweep through the entire primordial world. Regardless of whether it was the Jie school, which was known as the #1 sect in the primordial world, or the Western sect, which occupied the Western land, they could not compete with it. With the 4 sects combined, not to mention 500 Daluo Taoist priests, they might not even be able to gather 500 Daluo Jingxian. The gap between them was obvious at a glance. The gap between heaven and earth was nothing more than that. On this day, the 500 Khanate Taoist priests of the human race entered the ancestral land together, shocking the entire primordial world. This should be the first time the human race showed their sharpness to the primordial world. The effect was very pleasant. The tens of thousands of races were frightened, the great divine abilities changed expressions, and the saints frowned. They were all afraid of the power of the human race. At this moment, everyone understood that the human race was not a role that could be controlled by them. If they wanted to move the human race, they had to consider whether they had the ability to resist the joint attack of 500 Khanate Taoist priests. What is the human emperor doing? Why did he gather so many Daluo Taoist priests? Is he going to fight to the death with the saints? At this moment, the people who were watching the show finally panicked. The combined power of the ancestral land of the human race was enough to destroy the primordial world. If they fought with the saints again, it would be another decisive battle between the liches and demons. At that time, the primordial world would be destroyed. All the living beings in the world would not be able to stay out of it. They would all be affected. Bad things did not happen to them. Of course, they were willing to watch the show. However, once bad things happened to them, they would be more flustered than anyone else. They were so terrified that most of them looked at the ancestral land of the human race, waiting for the next step of the human emperor's plan. If the human emperor really wanted to fight with the saints, they would have to make plans early. The best choice was to seek refuge with a powerful person. Under the great tribulation of heaven and earth, even the Daluo Taoist priests were in danger of dying. Only the powerful people could protect themselves. Everyone was looking forward to the next step of Feng Zichen's plan. However, they did not expect that after he called the Daluo Taoist priests to the ancestral land of the human race, there was no movement. The ancestral land of the human race fell into silence. However, the more it was like this, the more flustered everyone was. Calm was often a sign of the coming storm. The calmer it was now, the more terrifying the storm that would come later would be. The human emperor must be doing something big. Everyone thought so. Just as everyone was worried and afraid, in another part of the primordial world, in the Jade Palace of Kunlun Mountain, a conversation about the human race was going on. 500 Daluo Taoist priests. The early stage of the demon race is just like this. The human race has hidden so well. If they were not exposed at this time, even the poor Wei would not know that there are 500 Daluo Taoist priests in the human race. After taking a deep look in the direction of the ancestral land of the human race, the heavenly lord of the origin still said in disbelief. 500 Daluo Taoist priests was really beyond his expectations. The number of Taoist priests in the human race is indeed beyond expectations. The poor Wei also calculated that although there are many Daluo Taoist priests in the human race, there should not be more than 300 of them. But now, 500 Daluo Taoist priests in the human race have appeared, which is more than 200 more than the poor Wei expected. This, sigh, it seems that we have underestimated fellow Daoist Gaochen. He must have some means to hide from our senses so that we can't detect the breakthrough of the human Taoist priests. After the heavenly lord of the origin finished speaking, the Grand Pure One said. As the most proficient schemer among the saints, he had been secretly paying attention to the human race. Every time a Daluo Taoist priest was born in the human race, he would secretly remember it. However, even so, he still missed more than 200 of them. Obviously, the Grand Pure One's methods were not as brilliant as Feng Zichen's. Otherwise, such a situation would not have happened. Fortunately, after the battle between the Magi demon race, the environment of the world degenerated from the Khanate era to the postnatal era, making it harder and harder to attain the Tao. If not for that, the number of Daluo Taoist priests in the human race would have doubled. At this moment, Daoist Kundi suddenly said with a look of fear. That was because he thought of a possibility. The environment of the world was already so bad, but the human race could still give birth to so many Daluo Taoist priests. What if the world did not change? What would happen to the human race? They would probably be as powerful as the Magi demon race. As soon as he said that, everyone immediately fell silent as they thought of that possibility. Moreover, who can guarantee that these 500 Daluo Taoist priests are all the Taoist priests in the human race? The Gaochen is good at scheming. Why would he expose all his trump cards in front of the world? After a moment of silence, Saint Jia-yin said leisurely. Hearing that, everyone's heart skipped a beat. That's right, the Gaochen was such a smart person. Why would he expose his trump cards when the situation was unclear? There must be other Daluo Taoist priests in the human race hiding in the dark. Thinking of that, everyone was even more determined to suppress the human race. The human race had become a big problem. If they did not suppress them, they would probably become another Magi demon race. Why do you think the human emperor would summon the Daluo Taoist priests to the human race's ancestral land with such great fanfare? Wouldn't it be better to summon them secretly? Is he provoking us by doing this? As if he had thought of a possibility, the Grand Master of Heaven said. He could not help but think so. It was obviously more appropriate to summon the Daluo Taoist priests in secret. However, Feng Zichen wanted to do the opposite. He summoned everyone to the human race's ancestral land with great fanfare and made everyone know about it. This move. It was quite a show of force to the saint. Just as the saint decided to suppress him, Feng Zichen pulled out hundreds of Daluo Taoist priests. His intention was very clear. He wanted to go against the sage. What's the big deal? Not to mention provocation, even if he really attacked, it's not like he wouldn't dare. Hearing the Grand Master of Heaven's guess, Daoist Kundi said indifferently. In this world, was there anything that Gaochen did not dare to do? Just provocation was already giving the saint a lot of face. If it was in the past, he would have directly attacked. In the untainted land, Feng Zichen was the only one who dared to attack a sage without a word. Even Di Jun and Di Jiang were not so arrogant. That's true. The Grand Master of Heaven thought about it and agreed. Emperor Gaochen was famous for being arrogant. Before he attained the Tao, he dared to fight with Tai. After he attained the Tao, he had repeatedly clashed with the saint and did not suffer much. It could even be said that he had taken advantage of him. Rumble. Just as the five saints were discussing Feng Zichen, a huge fluctuation suddenly came from heaven and earth. The saints felt something and looked up at the sky. They saw the Xianhuang merit qi gathering in the sky and descending toward the human race. Seeing this, the five saints were stunned at first, but they immediately understood what had happened. Feng Zichen's plan had succeeded. The disciples of the Chan school and the Jie school had completed the construction of the human race's teleportation system and officially put it into operation. For this, heaven and earth had specially given merit to reward the disciples of the two schools. Good job, Xianqing. Daoist Grandmaster of Heaven really taught a good disciple. After being stunned for a moment, Daoist Kundi shouted at the Grandmaster of Heaven with a face full of anger. The saints knew everything in the world with just a thought. Xianqing's plan could not be hidden from their senses. Of course, this also had something to do with Xianqing not hiding it at all. Xianqing thought that he had done this matter openly and with a clear conscience. Since that was the case, why did he hide it? There was nothing that could not be told. Ha! Cough, cough. Daoist Kundi is right. Xianqing's actions are indeed a little too much. When we return to Golden Ao Island on behalf of the poor Wei, we will definitely punish him severely. To be honest, after learning about Xianqing's plan, the Grand Master of Heaven's first reaction was not anger, but joy. Look! He almost laughed out loud just now. Xianqing's plan could be said to have solved one of the Grand Master of Heaven's worries. Ever since he returned from the Purple Cloud Palace, he had been worried. The Grand Master of Heaven knew what his disciples were like. Therefore, he also knew that some disciples were destined to be on the God roll, and some would die in the tribulation. The Grand Master of Heaven had already planned to give up on these disciples. But his outstanding disciples, such as the three direct disciples, the three Shao immortals, Zhao Gongming, and the like, should not be on the roll. Therefore, the Grand Master of Heaven had been thinking of ways to protect them. But he did not expect that before he could think of a way, Xianqing had already solved it for him. How could the Grand Master of Heaven not be happy? It was just that he did not want to laugh out loud because of the occasion. He had to pretend to be angry for everyone to see. Seeing that the Grand Master of Heaven almost laughed out loud, Daoist Kundi was undoubtedly even angrier. P.S. There's one more update, but it's very late. So, go to sleep. You can read it tomorrow. Chapter 736. What was Xianqing trying to do? They were thinking of ways to deal with the North Star, but not only did Xianqing not want to help, he even stabbed them in the back. Now, the North Star had completed this matter of great merit with the help of the disciples of the two sections. It was undoubtedly one step closer to achieving the Tao fruit of the human emperor and became more difficult to deal with. Xianqing was stabbing them in the back this time. Originally, when they were dealing with the North Star, they they did not know where to start. Now that Qianqing did this, it undoubtedly made it more difficult for them to deal with the North Star. That was unbearable. All right. Daoist Kundi, don't say any more. Poor Wei and the others will teach Qianqing a lesson after this matter is over. At that moment, the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning said unhappily. He was very angry, very angry. Of course, he was not angry at Qianqing, but his disciples. The Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning was very satisfied with Qianqing. Looking at his performance in this matter, no one could find any fault with it. He was impartial between the Jie sect and the Chan sect. That made the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning very satisfied. There was no difference between sects in his heart and only the disciples of the Xian sect in his eyes. That was the demeanor of the eldest senior brother of the Xian sect. The more satisfied he was with Qianqing, the more dissatisfied the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning was with his disciples. What people were most afraid of was comparison. Compared to Qianqing, the disciples of the Chan sect could not stand it at all. Look, Qianqing had taken the initiative to send merit to them, but the disciples of the Chan sect did not want it. Are they stupid? The moment he knew that the disciples of the Chan sect had chosen, the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning really wanted to call his disciples over and ask them loudly. Are you stupid? Why don't you go to heaven if you don't want merit that is sent to you? But he could not. He cared about his reputation. Even if his disciples were in the wrong, he could not reprimand them in front of everyone. Let's not talk about this anymore. Even if Qianqing does not let his disciples do it, the human emperor will find someone else to do it. It will not affect his plan. So, it's meaningless to talk about Qianqing's merits now. It's better to think about how to deal with the North Star. Seeing that the Daoist Kundi still wanted to say something, the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning's words. In his opinion, what Qianqing did this time was not wrong. Instead, it was meritorious. When he saw that things were not going well, he immediately changed his attitude and went with the flow, thinking that he was seeking the greatest benefit. That was very in line with the way the Grand Pure One dealt with the world. The success of the North Star plan was inevitable. Seeing that he couldn't stop them, Qianqing decided to join in and seek benefits for his side. This was obviously the way of a smart person. It was also the most practical method. The Grand Pure One was the most practical person among the saints. He always looked at the results, not the process. As long as the result was beneficial to him, the process did not matter at all. Daoist Kundi was not an iron-headed person. Since the three pure ones had said so, he naturally would not pursue the matter. 500 Daluo Taoist priests. This force is beyond our control. If we want to deal with the human race, we can only rely on external forces. In order to prevent Daoist Jun Ti from being surrounded by the three pure ones, Saint Jie Yin hurriedly changed the topic. External force? Could it be demon race? Hearing Saint Jie Yin's words, the Grand Pure One seemed to have understood something and looked at him inexplicably. This fellow was a little black-hearted. He actually thought of using the demons to deal with the human race. There were not many external forces that could threaten the human race in the entire primordial world. It was not difficult for the Grand Pure One to guess. Apart from the three Khanate races, there were only the Magi and demon races. The three Khanate races and the Magi were allies of the human race. They would definitely not attack the human race. That left only the Yao race. Speaking of the demons, the North Sea demons and the 10 demon gods of the ancient heavenly courts could produce about 100 Daluo Taoist priests. This force was indeed very suitable to restrain the human race. The Grand Master of Heaven and the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning could naturally think of what the Grand Pure One could think of. They looked at Saint Jie Yin with strange gazes as if they were meeting him for the first time. This Saint Jie Yin was quite something. He did not expect that under his compassionate appearance, he was also hiding a bellyful of evil tricks. One could not judge a book by its cover. Using the demons to deal with the humans was not just bad. It was so bad that smoke was coming out of it. No matter who won or lost, it was a good thing for the saints. It would be even better if both sides suffered heavy losses. Be it the demons or the humans, they were all targets that the saints wanted to suppress. That was because they could shake the ruling position of the saints. While the saints were thinking this, what Saint Jiayin said next gave them a huge shock. Yes and no. Saint Jiayin shook his head and said, "The demons that the poor Wei mentioned are the demon gods that have fallen into a long slumber." What? Fellow Taoist Jiayin, are you crazy? You actually want to revive those demon gods that have long fallen? Hearing that, everyone could not help but stand up in shock. The ancient demons were much stronger than the current humans. If they were revived, they could fight against the humans. However, if they were not careful, perhaps they would not only deal with the humans, but also them. The ancient demon clan was so powerful that even the saints had to retreat. It was not something that the current human clan could compare with. Although the current humans were strong, they were only valued by the saints and did not make them have the thought of retreating. However, the ancient demons could. From the attitude of the saints, it could be seen that there was still a big gap between the humans and the ancient demons. Only by making the saints fear the humans could the humans be on par with the ancient demons and then surpass them. Fellow Taoists, don't be agitated. The poor Wei is just saying. She doesn't really intend to put it into action. This is the last resort. Unless it's a last resort, it must not be used. Seeing that everyone was so agitated, Saint Jiayin hurriedly explained. It's good that you know the severity of the matter. Hearing that, everyone heaved a sigh of relief and sat down again. It was no wonder that they were so nervous. The ancient demons had touched on the taboo in the hearts of the saints, Dijun and Tai. A revived ancient demon god was not terrifying, nor was it worthy of the saints' fear. Even if all the fallen ancient demon gods were revived, it would be the same. The strength of the saints was not something that mere ancient demon gods could shake. What really made the saints fear were the two people that they could not forget, Dijun and Tai. No, to be more precise, it should be Tai, the existence that had once been invincible in the primordial world. Tai's strength was recognized by the primordial world. Even the three pure ones had been defeated by him in a one-on-one battle. His strength could not be measured by common sense. He was not a saint, but he was better than one. It was because they were afraid of Tai that the saints were unwilling to revive the ancient demon gods. If the ancient demon gods were to revive, the first thing they would do would not be to attack the human race or the witch race. Instead, they would think of a way to revive Tai and Dijun. Therefore, the saints would never allow the ancient demon gods to revive. In fact, not to mention the fallen ancient demon gods, even the 10 great demon gods who were still alive were under constant surveillance by the sages. Their purpose was naturally to prevent these demon gods from secretly reviving Dijun and Tai. To this day, there was still no news of Dijun and Tai in the primordial world. This was the work of the saints. In an unknown corner of the primordial world, the saints had set up countless methods to prevent the return of Tai and Dijun. If it were not for the witch race still having goddess hoodoo, the saints would also interfere with their return, even if it were the 11 ancestral wizards. The ancestral Magi Palace could stand in the primordial world for so many years not because the saints could not see it, nor because they had the merit of suppressing the primordial world. Instead, it was because goddess hoodoo was behind them. If it were not for this, the saints would have destroyed the ancestral Magi Palace long ago. Dijun and Tai were at a disadvantage because the demon race did not have a powerful figure like goddess hoodoo. As a result, after they died, they were targeted in all kinds of ways, making it difficult for them to return. The ancient demon gods can be used as trump cards. We won't use them for the time being. However, the current North Sea demon race and the 10 great demon gods can be used. Also, the human race has dominated the primordial world for so many years. Many races are dissatisfied with them and want to replace them. And these races that are dissatisfied with the human race are also targets that we can use. With their strength, although they can't touch the foundation of the jade human race, they can create some chaos for the human race. The more chaotic the human race is, the greater our chances and the lower our chances of success. With the discussion of the 5 saints, a complete plan against the human race was sorted out by them. Then, it was time to implement it. Just as the saints were discussing how to deal with the human race, the ancestral land of the human race was bustling. From afar, one could see that in the sky above the ancestral land of the human race, endless wind and clouds were gathering, constantly surging and surging. There were also huge waves of connate Taoist rhymes rushing up from the ancestral land, colliding and intertwining in the air, deducing all kinds of mysteries of the great Tao. This was the aura that the human Taoist priests naturally emitted. Every Daluo Jingxian could be said to be the incarnation of their corresponding great Tao. Naturally, their bodies carried the aura of the great Tao. And when 500 Daluo Taoist priests gathered together, the aura of the great Tao on their bodies overlapped, creating a strange phenomenon. At this moment, the human race's ancestral land seemed to have turned into a supreme Tao domain. Inside, thousands of Daos intertwined, the connate Taoist rhymes filled the air, and endless luck gathered. How could it not be a Tao domain? 500 incarnations of the great Tao gathered together. The Taoist rhymes on their bodies could turn a mortal land into a sacred land, not to mention the extraordinary ancestral land of the human race. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a Tao domain. At this moment, the cultivators in the human race's ancestral land were very lucky. Cultivating here was more than 100 times faster than cultivating in the outside world. Especially the cultivators who cultivated the connate Tao. Cultivating here was as if they had returned to the ancient connate era. Not only did they get twice the results with half the effort, but they also had a deeper understanding of the connate Tao. At this moment, what were Feng Zichen and the Daluo Taoist priests of the human race doing? Could it be that they were discussing how to deal with the saint as everyone thought? Of course not. Feng Zichen was discussing the Tao with them. 500 Daluo Taoist priests were indeed a very powerful force, but in front of the saints, it was completely not enough. Unless each of them had a supreme-grade connate spiritual treasure, the 500 human Taoist priests would not be able to defeat the saints with one hand. In that case, why would Feng Zichen send them to their deaths? It should be known that the 500 Daluo Taoist priests could be said to be more than 70% of the power of the human race in the untainted land. They could not be lost. At present, the number of Taoist priests of the human race was definitely more than 500. Just as the saints thought, Feng Zichen could not expose all the resources of the human race, so he had to leave something behind. Therefore, Feng Zichen deliberately hid some Daluo Taoist priests. In fact, there should be about 600 Daluo Taoist priests of the human race. 500 of them were in front of Feng Zichen, while the other 100 were hidden by him. They were hidden in the boundless starry sky. In this era, it was not easy to cultivate Daluo Taoist priests, but it was not very difficult for Feng Zichen. Because not only did he have a lot of resources, but he was also willing to spend them. Just by relying on resources, Feng Zichen could cultivate many Daluo Taoist priests. Over the years, the production of the boundless starry sky had been used by Feng Zichen on these Daluo Taoist priests. This was the reason why there were so many Daluo Taoist priests of the human race. It should be known that countless years had passed, and under the hard work of the god Pangu, the boundless starry sky had returned to its peak, and there was a trend of further improvement. However, Feng Zichen had been keeping it a secret, so no one knew about it. Back then, the demon race relied on the boundless starry sky to cultivate 3,000 Daluo demon gods. Now, Feng Zichen controlled the boundless starry sky that was stronger than before. Even if he did not control it for as long as the demon race leader, it was not too much to cultivate more than 100 Daluo Taoist priests for the human race at all costs, right? It could be said that nearly 1/3 of the 600 Daluo Taoist priests of the human race came from the boundless starry sky, and the other 1/3 more or less received help from the boundless starry sky. Only 1/3 of the Daluo Taoist priests were cultivated by the human race. From this point of view, it was not too much to say that Feng Zichen had raised half of the human race alone. Feng Zichen had paid a price for cultivating so many Daluo Taoist priests. For this reason, the overall improvement of the boundless starry sky had been delayed for a period of time. In other words, in order to cultivate these Daluo Taoist priests, Feng Zichen did not hesitate to delay the incubation of the innate star gods, innate spiritual treasures, and innate cardinal treasures in the Zhoxing. The loss was almost equivalent to half of an innate cardinal treasure, and it was enough to make Feng Zichen feel heartache for a long time. However, the result was still gratifying, and his efforts were not in vain. The human race had hundreds more Daluo Taoist priests, and they really had the capital to dominate the Eldritch wilderness. And these 600 Daluo Taoist priests were only the Taoist priests of the Eldritch wilderness. P.S. When I say late, I usually mean 3 in the morning. Chapter 737. Outside the primordial world, in the realm C, there were still 400 Daluo Taoist priests of the human clan. These were all direct descendants of Feng Zichen, the foundation of the path of gods and demons, and the greatest trump card of the human clan. In total, there were more than 1,000 Daluo Taoist priests of the human clan. Although this force was still incomparable to the shaman and demon clan at their peak, it was definitely enough to contend with them. The human clan had already risen. But this was not enough. Although the human clan was becoming stronger, the saints were not standing still. They were also becoming stronger. If the saints had just attained the Tao, with the current strength of the human clan, they might not be afraid of the saints. But now, it was obviously not possible. Because the current saints were much stronger than the saints of that time. If the human clan did not want to be afraid of the saints and get rid of their control, they had to continue to become stronger. Become stronger. Become stronger. Become stronger again. Feng Zichen gathered these Khanate Taoist priests of the human clan. His purpose was not to fight the saints as everyone thought, but to increase the strength of the human clan. As for why all living beings would think so, it could only be said that they were scaring themselves. Becoming stronger was not something that could be done overnight, but a gradual process. In ancient times, the human clan had the 5 elements Tao scripture, which was used as a foundation to increase the strength of the human clan. But the human clan at that time was much stronger than the human clan now. Moreover, the 5 elements Tao scripture was a foundation cultivation method that matched the path of gods and demons. Now, it was still a little outdated. For this reason, Feng Zichen specially called these Daluo Taoist priests over. He wanted to combine everyone's wisdom to deduce a new cultivation method that was suitable for the entire human clan to cultivate and popularize it among the human clan. He wanted to use this cultivation method to spread martial arts throughout the world and popularize martial arts among the human clan. If everyone in the world was like a dragon, how could the saints dare to continue scheming against the human clan? This cultivation method could be said to carry Feng Zichen's great ambition. Everyone worked together and spent 1,000 years to create a cultivation method. It was called the World's Martial Arts Master Guide, and Feng Zichen called it the Martial Arts Code. With the martial code completed, Feng Zichen first engraved it on the heavenly steel of martial arts. Then, he used a supreme divine ability to scatter it all over the human race for the human race to browse. As soon as the martial arts codex appeared, the human race's luck shook. Although it didn't increase by much, it became more stable. Compared to the slight change in the human tribe's providence, the change in the martial path's providence was much greater. It increased by several times, overshadowing the heavenly immortal Tao in one fell swoop before gradually coming to a stop. And this was only the beginning. With the popularization of martial arts in the human race, the fate of martial arts would become stronger and stronger until it was replaced by the immortal Tao of the celestial sect and became the mainstream of the untainted land. After deducing the martial arts codex, Feng Zichen did not let everyone leave. Instead, he pulled them along to deduce the human path Abhijna. What was the human Tao divine ability? It was a divine ability that was useful to the human race. God for human use. Feng Zichen wanted to integrate the divine ability into the daily lives of the common people. Cultivators could soar through the clouds and summon the wind and rain. But mortals could not. A cultivator could travel between a city and a place in a short time, but a mortal would need several days or even several months to do so. Cultivators could not eat or drink, but mortals could not. Cultivators did not need to work at sunrise and rest at sunset, but mortals had to. And what Feng Zichen wanted to do was to change this situation. He wanted to study some divine abilities to save the ordinary human race from endless labor so that they would have time to cultivate martial arts. Feng Zichen popularized martial arts, causing the human race to enter the stage of cultivation. But mortals had to run around every day for their livelihood, so how could they have time to cultivate? Therefore, Feng Zichen wanted to change this situation. The human path Abhijna was born for this. Integrating the Abhijna into the daily lives of ordinary people would help them reduce the time they had to work and have more time to cultivate. To put it bluntly, the so-called human path Abhijna was the Xianxia version of high-tech. When there was a drought, use the Abhijna to rain. When there were too many weeds in the ground, use the Abhijna to remove the weeds. When the weather was too hot, use the Abhijna to cool down. When the weather was too cold, use the Abhijna to heat up. In short, it was to use the Abhijna to control the environment, turning it from uncontrollable to controllable. It was said to be an Abhijna, but it did not have to exist in the form of an Abhijna. Naturally, it had to be as convenient as possible. It could be a talisman, a magic artifact, or an array disc. For example, a talisman that could automatically adjust the temperature. Wasn't that much more convenient than an air conditioner? Wasn't a flying boat powered by a cultivation pill more convenient than a car? Could a car fly? An array disc that could automatically drive dust was much more useful than a sweeping robot. And so on. The technology that Feng Zichen had seen in his previous life would be recreated by his extraordinary means. These were the tasks that Feng Zichen had given to the human race, Daluo Taoist priests, to turn them from ideas into reality. In the ancestral land of the human race, Feng Zichen used his supreme Abhijna and pulled the human race, Daluo Taoist priests, into his dream, bringing them to experience the elegance of an interstellar civilization. Everyone, you've all seen the scene in my dream, right? After waking up from the dream, Feng Zichen said to the people below. I saw it. It was very exciting. This is a civilization that is different from the immortal path system. It seems to have developed external forces to the limit. It can give us a lot of inspiration. After coming back to their senses, everyone said with some unfinished words. They had really taken a good look at this journey in the dream realm. They had never thought that there would be other civilizations in the world. The optical computer, the network, the spaceship, the mecha, the genetic modification, it really gave them a refreshing feeling. It was a pity that it was just a dream. It was all illusory and did not exist. Otherwise, if they could be allowed to comprehend in that interstellar civilization for tens of thousands of years, then they might have the possibility of taking a step forward. The collision of civilizations and the impact of ideas would ignite the sparks of wisdom. And these sparks of wisdom would be the capital for everyone to take a step forward. It's good that you've seen it. Then I'm relieved. What do you think of what you saw in the dream? Was it both real and illusory? Nodding, Feng Zichen asked. Your Majesty, please forgive us. We are ignorant and can't tell whether what we saw in the dream is real or not. But from those creations, we can see that the dream world has great wisdom. Everyone thought for a moment before answering. Feng Zichen's dream world was both real and illusory. With their strength, it was indeed difficult to tell the difference between real and illusory. But this did not prevent them from studying the things in the dream. Based on their many years of cultivation experience, it was indeed a civilization that was different from the immortal path system. It did not seem to belong to the primitive world. Perhaps, everything in the dream before did not exist. But at this moment, since it can be seen by you, then it is real. The charm of cultivation lies in this. Turning the illusory into reality, refining the false into the real, and turning the impossible into the possible. After listening to everyone's answer, Feng Zichen said slowly, but he was guiding them on the true meaning of cultivation. There was nothing that cultivation could not do. If there was, it meant that you were not strong enough. Refining the false into the real was to turn all the illusory into reality. Even if it was just a dream, it could be turned into reality. Thank you, Your Majesty, for your guidance. Hearing this, everyone bowed. It's fine. I have a request for guiding you. Since you have seen everything in the dream, you should know how important it is to the human race. So, I want you to use the immortal path to refine it for the human race to use. So, can you do it? Waving his hand, Feng Zichen asked. We will not disappoint your majesty. Everyone stood up and promised Feng Zichen. After all, they were Daluo Taoist priests. It was not difficult for them to refine what they saw. Feng Zichen's request was not difficult for them. Since you are confident, I will not say anything else. I just hope that you can understand that the future of the human race lies in your hands. After saying that, Feng Zichen's figure disappeared in front of everyone. The mission had been given, so there was no need for him to stay here. After all, he was the human emperor. There were many things to do. After leaving everyone, Feng Zichen returned to the human emperor's palace and summoned the disciples of the Jie school and the Chan school. His purpose was to thank them for their contributions to the human race. Secondly, he had a new mission to give them. That was to build a city for the human race. That's right, it was to build a city. Build a huge city during the ancient human race. In ancient times, Feng Zichen led the human race to build many huge cities in the primordial world to resist the invasion of foreign races. The huge city of the human race was connected to the stars and the dragon vein. It gathered the power of the two to nurture the dragon chi and resist foreign enemies. It was really mysterious. Unfortunately, after the ancient war, the human race was no match for the power of the demon race and was forced to fall into depravity. The huge city that was built previously was also destroyed in the hands of the demon race. It became a great regret of the human race. If those huge cities were still around, the human race's current strength would probably be stronger. Now, Feng Zichen had regained control of the human race. Naturally, he had plans to build a huge city. No, it should be called a divine city. That was because the conditions to build a huge city were much better than in ancient times. In ancient times, to build a huge city, one had to first explore the terrain and find the location of the dragon vein. But now, there was no need for that. There were 365 universe divine palaces in the human territory. And these heavenly cycle temples were the best coordinates. If the human race wanted to build a huge city, there was no need to explore the terrain and search for the dragon vein. They could just use these heavenly cycle temples as the center and build a huge city. They were all on the nodes of the earth vein. Every one of them was a unique land of creation. The starlight of the heavenly cycle temples hung up and drew in endless stellar power. The huge city built here could no longer be called a huge city. It should be called a divine city. As for why the disciples of Chan school and Jie school were allowed to build divine cities for the human race, other than to rope them in, it was more because they were more familiar with the huge cities of the ancient human race. Back then, when Feng Zichen built the huge city for the human race, he had completely refined it as a Dharma treasure. This move could be said to be the peak of the knowledge of the primordial world cultivators. It turned out that Dharma treasures could be refined in this way. This groundbreaking move attracted many people to come and observe the huge city of the human race to understand its structure and refining methods. The disciples of Chan school and Jie school were among them. Therefore, after the ancient human race fell, the disciples of the two sects became the people who knew the huge city of the human race the best. In the entire human race, there were not many people who knew the huge city of the human race better than them. Most of the people who knew more than them were dead, and a small number were in the realm C. For this reason, the disciples of the two sects became Feng Zichen's best choice. He was not afraid that the disciples of the two sects would reject him. That was because when the human race fell and the demons destroyed the traces of the human race, the disciples of the two sects had secretly taken away a few huge cities of the human race for collection. What was karma? This was it. With this karma, Feng Zichen was not afraid that the disciples of the two sects would reject him. Who asked them to be greedy back then? At the right time, the human race became the main characters of the world. The geographical advantage was 365 heavenly cycle temples. The people and the disciples of the two sections. According to this, it was the best opportunity for Feng Zichen to build a divine city. He had no reason to refuse. Under the threat of karma, the disciples of the two sects finally agreed to build a divine city for the human race. However, the human race still had to be responsible for the materials needed to build the city. In this regard, Feng Zichen had no objection. This was what he should do. With the current foundation of the human race, it was more than enough to take out the materials needed to build a divine city. It was an exaggeration to say that it was a drizzle, but it was not to the extent of hurting the muscles and bones. After all, the human race had not developed in vain all these years. They had accumulated some foundation. Now, what Feng Zichen wanted to do was to convert the foundation of the human race into strength. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, 1,000 years had passed. After 1,000 years of preparation, the project of building a divine city was finally put on the agenda by the disciples of the two sects and began to take action. 1,000 years was enough for martial arts manuals to spread among the human race, causing many changes to the human race. After all, in this world, practicing martial arts could really change one's fate. For this reason, many people yearned for martial arts. Now that there was a better introductory cultivation method, everyone naturally practiced it enthusiastically. For a time, there was a craze for practicing martial arts in the human race. More and more people practiced martial arts. The prosperity of martial arts naturally affected the other orthodoxies. The path of gods and demons and the path of immortals all showed signs of weakening. The path of immortals was fine. Its foundation was deep. Even if it weakened, it would not shake its foundation. However, the path of gods and demons was not good. It had been abandoned by the times and was about to become a legend. If it were not for the fact that the martial arts were also created by Feng Zichen, the situation of the path of gods and demons was enough to make him vomit blood. The decline was too great. It was almost extinct. In the ancestral land, the Daluo Taoist priests also had some results. They were making the final adjustments and putting them into use. Everything was developing in a good direction. The human race as a whole showed a trend of prosperity, and their luck was getting stronger and stronger. If nothing unexpected happened, Feng Zichen would be able to successfully condense his own human emperor Dao fruit in tens of thousands of years. Unfortunately, unforeseen events always happened inadvertently. It was the sages. They were going to attack the human race. Chapter 738. After thousands of years, the sage finally made his preparations and began to bare his fangs against the human race. At the human race's border, there were the other Ho Tian races that were defeated by Yu the Great when he was controlling the flood. In the ancient Xianyuan period, there were also the mutants who betrayed the human race and joined forces to invade the human race's border. No one knew what benefits the sage promised them that made them have such an overconfident idea. How dare they attack the human race? They must be tired of living. Why don't they look at themselves? The two forces together couldn't even gather 5 Daluo Taoist priests. Even if they used the power of the entire race to attack the human race, what was the use? Not to mention shaking the human race, they couldn't even create chaos for the human race. The gap between the two sides was too big. Not to mention anything else, the gap between 500 Daluo Taoist priests and 5 Daluo Taoist priests was enough to make them despair. After hearing that these two forces invaded the human race's border, Feng Zichen didn't take it to heart at all. He directly sent 1,000,000 troops to the border to trample the two races. The human race's military system was created by Feng Zichen by imitating the Heavenly Court's military system. In other words, mortals were not qualified to join the army. Those who were qualified to join the army had to at least have the cultivation of a celestial immortal. And these were only the most ordinary soldiers. To become an elite, one had to at least be a golden immortal. To become a general, one had to have the cultivation of a Tai Jinxian. To command an army, one had to have the cultivation of a Daluo Jinxian. As for the Daluo Taoist priests, they were somewhat detached and couldn't be judged by common sense. They had the qualifications to become the human race's elders. As for the sage to be, they could be called kings. In the name of the human king, they could help the human emperor govern the world. Among the 1,000,000 troops sent by Feng Zichen to suppress the two races, there were no Daluo Taoist priests. However, they were all elites of the human race. The weakest among them was a golden immortal. Apart from that, there were also 10,000 Taiyi Jingxian, 1,000 Daluo Jingxian, and 300 Khanate Dao Lords. Taiyi Jingxian and Daluo Jingxian aside, the 300 Xiantian Dao Lords were Feng Zichen's most cherished treasures, one of the most important reserves of the human race. At the same time, they were also the most elite troops of the human race. Their status was second only to the Daluo Taoist priests. What was a Dao Lord? It was the Taiyi Jingxian of the ancient times, the Taiyi Jingxian who cultivated the Tao of innate. In ancient times and before, Daluo Jingxian was known as the Taoist priests, while Taiyi Jingxian was known as the Taoist Lord. This was because after one's strength reached the level of Taiyi Jingxian, one would begin to touch the level of Tao. This Tao referred to the Tao of innate. Therefore, the current Taiyi Jingxian and Daluo Jingxian were not qualified to be called Dao Lords and Taoist priests. These 300 Xiantian Dao Lords could be said to be the seeds of the Daluo Taoist priests. They had the potential to transcend the river of fate and become the Daluo Taoist priests. Feng Zichen had sent them on this expedition to train them. He wanted them to fight the Daluo Taoist priests and constantly hover between life and death. There were great terrors and great opportunities between life and death. If they could see through it, even if they couldn't become the Daluo Taoist priests, they would still benefit greatly. They would be a small step closer to becoming the Daluo Taoist priests and become half-step Taoist priests. 300 Xiantian Dao Lords, 1,000 Daluo Jingxian, 10,000 Taiyi Jingxian, and 1,000,000 golden immortals. The formation set up by these people together, coupled with the treasures secretly given to them by Feng Zichen, was enough to kill the Daluo Taoist priests. The Hotian race and the mutant race added together only had 4 Daluo Taoist priests. It might not be possible for the 1,000,000 soldiers and the experts guarding the border of the human race to kill all of them together. But if they couldn't even kill 1 or 2 of them, they would be useless. Feng Zichen felt that the elites of the human race were not so useless. They would definitely be able to kill the Daluo Taoist priests. Why did Feng Zichen not send the Daluo Taoist priests but only 1,000,000 soldiers to quell the unrest between the two races? Was it because there were no Daluo Taoist priests in the human race? Did he not know that only 5 Daluo Taoist priests were needed to quell the unrest between the two races? No, Feng Zichen knew. But he was unwilling to do so. This was because Feng Zichen wanted to use this battle to tell the world that even without the Daluo Taoist priests, the human race still had the ability to kill the Daluo Taoist priests. Was it shocking that the Daluo Taoist priests killed the Daluo Taoist priests? Perhaps, but it was not enough to shock the people. However, it was different when the Taiyi Jingxian killed the Daluo Taoist priests. The effect would definitely shock the untainted land for 1,000,000 years and be deeply engraved in the hearts of all living beings. The human race did not even send the Daluo Taoist priests, but they were able to kill the Daluo Taoist priests. If the Daluo Taoist priests of the human race really took action, how powerful would they be? They would probably be able to kill powerful beings. Fear often came from the unknown. As long as the living beings could not see the depths of the human race, they would always be afraid of the human race and would not dare to have the thought of fighting against them. Just as the 1,000,000 soldiers of the human race were setting off, a sudden change was quietly happening on the distant Mount Shouyang. Mount Shouyang, the eldest direct disciple of the Grand Pure One, Xuandu, was cultivating in seclusion in the 8 Visions Palace. However, at this moment, the innate cardinal treasure Taiji diagram quietly appeared. Rumble. While Xuandu was unprepared, a vast and boundless power gushed out from the Taiji diagram. In the blink of an eye, it enveloped the entire hall. In an instant, the space-time in the hall froze. It was completely stagnant. As for Xuandu, he was naturally frozen on the spot. Since the Taiji diagram had appeared, the person who attacked Xuandu was obviously his master, the Grand Pure One. Xuandu was only at the perfected realm of the Daluo Taoist priests. How could he be a match for the Grand Pure One who held a Khanate cardinal treasure? It was not surprising that he was directly sealed. Disciple, don't blame me. I sealed you for your own good. With your status, it's not appropriate for you to help anyone in this battle between the saint and the human race. Therefore, in order to prevent you from being in a difficult position, I'll seal you and make you lose all perception of the outside world. In this way, no matter what the outcome of this battle is, it will not affect you. All the mistakes will be blamed on me. After you wake up, you will still be the eldest disciple of the Ren school, Xuandu, and the human race's Wang Yang. After sealing Xuandu, the Grand Pure One's voice sounded slowly. It turned out that the Grand Pure One was worried that Xuandu would be in a difficult position, so he sealed him directly so that he could be removed from the battle between the heavens and humans. Who was Xuandu? He was the only true disciple of the Grand Pure One, the successor of the Ren school. At the same time, he was also one of the first 9 human kings of the human race, the human king, Yi-Ang. With these 2 identities, it could be said to have brought great convenience to Xuandu. However, that was under the condition that the human race had a good relationship with the saint. Once the human race fell out with the saint, just like now, Xuandu's situation would become extremely awkward. It was wrong for him to help anyone. If he helped the human race, how could he repay his master's kindness? If he helped his master, how could he repay the human race's kindness of raising him? Therefore, the Grand Pure One's sealing of Xuandu was the best choice. Only then could he stay out of it. Ah! After sighing softly, the Grand Pure One's voice and the Taiji diagram disappeared from the hall. As for Xuandu, he did not react at all. The Grand Pure One's attack just now was as if he had pressed the pause button. It had completely paused Xuandu's time and stopped at that moment forever. At this moment, not to mention the Grand Pure One's words, even if someone attacked him, Xuandu would not feel it at all. When Xuandu woke up, it might be tens of thousands of years later. However, to him, time had only passed for an instant. His consciousness had been stuck at the previous moment. He was completely unaware of the thousands of years that had passed. In an instant, everything had changed. This was the current situation of Xuandu. The strength of the Grand Pure One's mystical abilities could be seen. Of course, this was the only way that Xuandu could completely stay out of it. What was a master-disciple relationship? That was it. The Grand Pure One's master-disciple relationship with Xuandu was truly beyond words. Huh? The aura of the Yi-Yang clan has disappeared. What's going on? In the human emperor's palace, the moment Xuandu was sealed by the Grand Pure One, Feng Zichen sensed that something was wrong with him. As the human emperor, Feng Zichen could sense the aura of all the experts of the human race. That was because, under the connection of the destiny of the human race, the aura of the human race experts was like a bonfire in the night to him. It was so eye-catching and eye-catching. The disappearance of every human expert was like the extinguishment of a bonfire in the darkness. It disappeared from Feng Zichen's perception. Therefore, the moment the Xianqing aura disappeared, Feng Zichen sensed it immediately. Surprised, Feng Zichen used the Ziwei divine calculation to deduce the situation of Xuandu. Soon, Feng Zichen found out the cause and effect of the disappearance of Xuandu's aura from the heavenly secrets. What a Grand Pure One! After coming back to his senses, Feng Zichen said. The Grand Pure One was indeed scheming and astute. He could even plot against him. If not for the permission of the Grand Pure One, how could Feng Zichen have calculated the situation of Xuandu so easily? It was because he did not intend to hide it that Feng Zichen could easily calculate it. As long as the Grand Pure One could cover it up, Feng Zichen would have no other way to know the true situation of Xuandu other than personally going to the Baiying Palace on Mount Shouyang to take a look. It was just like how Feng Zichen could conceal the heavenly secrets and the saint could not detect it. If the Grand Pure One concealed the heavenly secrets, Feng Zichen would not be able to detect it either. When the situation of Xuandu was placed in front of Feng Zichen, he would face a choice. Should he save Xuandu? With Feng Zichen's strength, it would be easy to save Xuandu. However, what could he do after saving him? Make things difficult for Xuandu? After thinking about it, Feng Zichen decided not to save Xuandu. It was good to let him be sealed by the Grand Pure One. At the thought of this, Feng Zichen was shocked. He seemed to understand the Grand Pure One's plan. The Grand Pure One did not hide the situation of Xuandu at all. Was he looking forward to him saving Xuandu? Compared to the Grand Pure One's action of sealing Xuandu, wasn't Feng Zichen's action of releasing Xuandu a little selfish? The Grand Pure One could say that he had sealed Xuandu for Xuandu's own good. However, could Feng Zichen release Xuandu for his own good? Feng Zichen thought about it from another perspective. If he were Xuandu, even if he did not say anything, he would still feel uncomfortable in his heart. He would gradually lean towards the Grand Pure One. At the thought of this, Feng Zichen could not help but sigh at the Grand Pure One's shrewdness. With a single mistake, he had almost missed a general and allowed the Grand Pure One to obtain a loyal disciple. Putting everything else aside, wouldn't a normal person's first reaction when they saw their friend being sealed be to save him? Why would he think so much about it? It was only Feng Zichen who was scheming that he noticed so many details. After guessing the Grand Pure One's plan, Feng Zichen looked at Xuandu again and discovered many details that he had not paid attention to previously. For example, the seal that the Grand Pure One used to seal Xuandu was indeed very powerful from the inside. With Xuandu's strength, it was impossible to break it. However, from the outside, the seal would shatter with a single touch. Just now, if Feng Zichen's spiritual will had scanned over, it would have shattered the moment it touched the seal on Xuandu. It was confirmed. This was the Grand Pure One's scheme against him. He wanted to sow discord between him and Xuandu without bloodshed. With that thought in mind, Feng Zichen used his mystical ability and added another seal outside Xuandu. Xuandu was indeed not suitable to appear in this battle. Since that was the case, he would seal him completely. After the battle ended, he would let him out. Since the Grand Pure One's seal was not safe, Feng Zichen would add another one. That way, it would be foolproof. Under such circumstances, if the seal on Xuandu's body was broken, it could only be done by the Grand Pure One. After all, it was the saint's Taoist sect, the Taoist sect of the first saint. Who would dare to cause trouble here? The Grand Pure One had personally sealed Xuandu and released him. What should this action be called? Oh. If it was the modern world, it should be called acting and standing. That was how the gap was created. The Grand Pure One naturally sensed Feng Zichen's actions. However, he did not say anything about that. It was a casual move. If he succeeded, it was naturally worth celebrating. If he failed, there was nothing to be depressed about. When Feng Zichen and the Grand Pure One were confronting each other, the million-strong army of the human race had already rushed to the border of the human race and met up with the human experts guarding there. There were not many soldiers guarding the border of the human race. There were only about 300,000 people. However, they were all elites and veterans of the human race. In terms of combat strength, they were even stronger than the million-strong army. After all, they were an army guarding the border. They had been fighting with foreign races all year round. If they were not strong, they would have died long ago. Putting everything else aside, most of the border soldiers were from the Jiang tribe and the Xiong tribe. From this, one could tell how powerful they were. Chapter 739. The Jiang tribe and the Xiong tribe belonged to the Yen Emperor and the Yellow Emperor. The resources enjoyed by the disciples of these tribes were naturally much better than the rest of the human race. And this was what made them so powerful. Since they had enjoyed treatment that exceeded that of ordinary people, they also had to bear the corresponding responsibility. Therefore, the disciples of these two tribes were sent to the border of the human race to defend against the invasion of the foreign race. 300,000 elites of the elites and millions of elites. It would be an exaggeration to say that this force could dominate the untainted land, but it was strong enough and could not be taken lightly. At the very least, the Daluo Taoist priests could not do it. After the million troops of the human race arrived at the border, they were not in a hurry to start a war with the two tribes. Instead, they sent messengers to the variant humans to persuade them to return to the human race. After all, they were once members of the human race. There were still many people in the human race who were unwilling to start a war with the variant humans. Therefore, after a unanimous discussion, they decided to give the variant humans one last chance. If they were willing to return to the human race, then their previous crimes could be written off and they could return to the human race. If they refused, then they could not blame the human race for being ruthless. The human race had never been merciful to their enemies. It was unknown what benefits the saint had given the variant human's ancestor to make him mercilessly refuse the goodwill of the human race. Since that was the case, there was nothing to talk about. A war was about to break out. Not long after the two sides deployed their troops, a war broke out. In fact, although it was called a war, the human race was one-sidedly crushing the variant humans. As soon as they started fighting, the allied forces of the two tribes were defeated by the human army and fled for their lives. In response, the human army naturally chased after them, intending to annihilate the main forces of the two tribes in one fell swoop. However, halfway through, the Daluo Taoist priests of the other side made a move. A Daluo Taoist priests of the post-celestial race stood alone in front of the million troops of the human race, intending to fight against the million troops of the human race with his own strength. To be honest, with the identity of the Daluo Taoist priests, it was indeed embarrassing for him to attack low-level cultivators. However, he had to make a move. Because if he still did not make a move, then the elites of his race would be wiped out. This kind of loss was a price that the post-celestial race could not bear. It would cause their race to fall from prosperity to decline. Face was very important, but compared to the rise and fall of the race, it was insignificant. Kill. The Taoist priests had the power to turn the world upside down. The Taoist priests of the post-celestial race pressed out with one hand, which transformed into a giant palm that blotted out the sky. He was about to slap the million-strong human army to death. As the Daluo Taoist priests, he was confident that he could single-handedly destroy the million-strong human army. The Daluo Taoist priests were just that strong. Those who had not reached this realm would never be able to understand the strength of this realm. This kind of strength was innate. It was not something that could be made up for by numbers. Although the million-strong human army was strong, they were as weak as ants in the eyes of the Daluo Taoist priests. For this reason, he was very confident and did not think that he would lose. However, the reality was that people often liked to say no to self-righteous people. Just as the Taoist priests thought that victory was in his hands, something unexpected happened. Even when facing the Daluo Taoist priests, the million-strong human army did not panic at all. They orderly arranged their formation, then opened their mouths and shouted at the Daluo Taoist priests. Kill. The word kill resounded through the world and shook the universe. Suddenly, endless blood and qi gushed out from the million-strong human army and connected into a wave in the air. Like a rolling wave, it swept toward the Daluo Taoist priests. At the same time, the destiny of the human race in the long river of destiny also shook violently. A terrifying power tore through the endless universe and spread out from the unknown void, fusing with the vast blood and qi. Rumble. At this moment, the universe changed. Heaven and earth shook, stirring up endless wind and clouds. After the blood and qi of the human race fused with the destiny of the human race, its power suddenly increased and reached an extremely shocking level in an instant. Under this power, the whole world became oppressive. The Daluo Taoist priests of the postnatal lineage who bore the brunt of this power changed his expression wildly and thought of running away. Oh no! It's the destiny of the human race. These soldiers can mobilize the destiny of the human race. Feeling the powerful power contained in the blood and qi of the human race, even the Daluo Taoist priests could not help but feel a little scared. The blood and qi of the human race might not be strong, but the power of the destiny of the human race was definitely unimaginably strong. Not to mention the Daluo Taoist priests, even a sage-to-be was suppressed. Thinking of this, the Daluo Taoist priests of the postnatal lineage turned and fled, not caring about his dignity as a Daluo Taoist priest. If he did not run, he would die. This was the Daluo Taoist priest's only thought at this moment. The power of destiny of the human race was too strong and far beyond what he could contend with. The Daluo Taoist priests were particularly sensitive to life and death. Since his intuition told him that he would die if he did not run, then it must be true. Therefore, if he wanted to run, he had to run as fast as he could. If he had known that the human race army could mobilize the power of destiny of the human race, he would not have foolishly rushed to the front like this. Instead, he would have used a safer method. Alas, if he had known, he would not have acted so pretentiously. At this moment, the Daluo Taoist priest's heart was filled with regret. But it was too late to say anything now because he was about to die. Seeing that the Daluo Taoist priest was about to escape, the commander of the human race army, Jiang Hong, suddenly took out a flag. It was unknown what method he used, but he gently waved the flag in his hand, and then, the Daluo Taoist priest was frozen in place. Boom! At this moment, the aura of the human race swept over and directly crushed the Daluo Taoist priest's body, tearing his physical body and primordial spirit into pieces. No, I can't accept this. I haven't achieved Dao yet. How can I die here? In the aura wave, the Daluo Taoist priest's innate indestructible true spirit let out an unwilling roar. However, the aura of the human race was like a blazing sun and a sacred flame, erupting with a powerful force and burning it into ashes. His physical body exploded, his primordial spirit dissipated, and his innate indestructible true spirit turned into ashes. The Daluo Taoist priests from the postnatal lineage could not be more dead. Moreover, he would not be able to be resurrected for a long time. How could it be so easy to resurrect someone who died under the power of destiny of the human race? Even with the help of a saint, he would have to pay a great price. In the distance, the other 3 Daluo Taoist priests who were about to rescue this person slowly withdrew their hands after sensing that something was wrong. It was too fast. It was really too fast. The Daluo Taoist priests died too fast. They did not have the chance to rescue him at all. By the time they realized that something was wrong and were about to rescue him, he was already gone. The strength of the human race has increased again. Looking at the human army that continued to chase after the defeated troops of the 2 races, the 3 of them had extremely ugly expressions. This time, they were too careless. They should not have been so easily tempted by the saints' conditions and become their pawns to test the strength of the human race for them. At the moment, they had not tested the strength of the human race yet, but the elites of their race were almost gone. The strength of the human race was much stronger than the human race in their memory. Over the years, they had been improving, and the human race had also been improving, and they were improving faster than them. This was very uncomfortable. This was especially so for the mutants. Their feelings were extremely complicated now. They had left the human race in order to obtain better development. But now that they looked back, they suddenly realized that if they had not left the human race, their development would have been better. As such, how could they not feel uncomfortable? At this point, it's useless to say more. Let's think of a way to deal with the human race first. At the moment, the human race's general trend has been formed, and it's far from what we can contend against. In my opinion, we'd better stay put. Let's wait for a while and see what the saint has to say. The 3 of them communicated for a moment and discussed the next plan. They would stay put and wait for the saint's support. There were a total of 4 Daluo Taoist priests in the 2 races. Their strength was at the same level. Even if there was a difference in strength, the difference would not be too big. This meant that since the human army had the ability to kill one of the 4 of them, it meant that they also had the strength to kill the 3 of them. Thinking of this, the 3 of them were afraid. It was normal that they did not dare to attack the human race. After all, they had just proven that they really could not defeat the human race. For this reason, there was only one path left in front of the 3 of them, which was to wait for the saint's support. Since the saint wanted to deal with the human race, he must be fully prepared and would not only let them attack. As long as they could hold on, when the saint's backup plan was launched, the pressure on the human race would increase greatly. That would be the opportunity for them to counterattack. Therefore, before the saint's next plan was carried out, they had to hold on for a while. The news that the human army of 1,000,000 joined forces and killed a Daluo Taoist priest in an instant in the border of the human race quickly spread in the primordial world. For a time, the world shook. The video of this battle was circulated among the tens of thousands of races and was read by people. After watching the video of the battle, the tens of thousands of races fell into silence. So, unknowingly, the human race had become so strong. Just the power of Providence mobilized by the million-strong army was enough to kill the Daluo Taoist priests. What would happen if this number was multiplied by 100 or 1,000 times? They would probably be able to suppress the sage-to-be and the powerful ones. They might even be able to contend with the saint. The strength of the human race was already comparable to that of the shaman and demon race. In this world, there would probably be another race that could suppress the past, present, and future. After this battle, the tens of thousands of races tacitly raised the status of the human race to the level of the shaman and demon race. The human race had been established. Sooner or later, it would become a powerful force that was comparable to the shaman and demon race. With the strength of the tens of thousands of races, it was impossible to contend with it. In this world, the only ones who could stop its development were the saints. If the powerful ones were right, the primordial world would become a battlefield between the saints and the human race. This was bound to be a battle that was not inferior to the battle between the shaman and demon race. It might even be more exciting. At the border of the human race, the two races could hide, but the human race could not. The entire primordial world was watching their performance. They were waiting for them to wipe out the two races in one fell swoop so that they could completely calm the chaos at the border of the human race. If they did not take action, they would lose the face of the entire human race. Therefore, the border army had been on the move. However, no matter what they did, the three Zenith Heaven Holy Masters only pretended not to see or hear anything. They only focused on guarding the area and did not come out. This made the border army unable to attack for a while. The three Daluo Taoist priests working together was enough to fight against the human army of 1,000,000. They were determined to defend, so it was normal that the human army could not attack. Seeing that time had passed, the human army still could not do anything to the two races. For a time, Feng Zichen gradually lost his patience. Just as his patience was exhausted and he was about to send out the Daluo Taoist priests, an unforeseen event happened. Among the two races, some mutants suddenly announced that they wanted to return to the human race. It turned out that when the human messengers went to the mutant lineage, they were not without gains. Although the ancestor of the mutant lineage rejected the suggestion of returning to the human race, this did not mean that the entire mutant lineage agreed with his decision. Just as there were people in the human race who did not want to start a war with the mutant lineage, there were also people in the mutant lineage who did not want to start a war with the human race. In the past, even if they had parted ways, how could they bear to fight against each other? Therefore, under the continuous persuasion of the human race, they were finally persuaded to return to the human race. And this became the turning point of the war. The betrayal of some of the mutants caused the perfect defense set up by the three Taoist priests to collapse from the inside. This also gave the human army a chance. They launched the fiercest attack and drove straight in through the gap, wiping out the remaining forces of the two races in one fell swoop. At this point, the chaos at the human border was quelled. As for the three Taoist priests of the two races, they did not suffer any harm. After all, with the three of them working together, the strength of the human army could not do anything to them. However, more than half of their clansmen had died in battle, and their territory had been occupied by the human race. The three of them did not have the face to continue staying here. They gathered their remaining clansmen and rushed in the direction of Kunlun Mountain. At this time, only the saint could protect them. After all, they had attacked the human race under the orders of the saint, which was why they had ended up like this. The saint had to be responsible for this. Otherwise, who would dare to work for them in the future? As for going back to take revenge on the human army, the three of them wanted to. Unfortunately, Feng Zichen did not give them the chance. In order to prevent the three of them from jumping over the wall in desperation, Feng Zichen sent several Daluo Taoist priests to come here and stare at them. It was because they sensed the aura of these Daluo Taoist priests that the three of them left without hesitation. If they did not leave now, when the three of them were surrounded, they would not be able to leave even if they wanted to. The three of them were very fast. It did not take long for them to arrive near Kunlun Mountain. Just as they were about to step into the range of Kunlun Mountain, Feng Zichen, who was far away in the ancestral land of the human race, moved. P.S. Yesterday. Chapter 740. Rumble. Vast and boundless mana rushed out of the ancestral land of the human race, wrapped in the destiny of the human race. Like a torrent of the human race, it swept everything and crashed into the three people who were about to enter Kunlun Mountain. Bang! With a deafening explosion, the three Zenith Heaven Dao Masters were blasted into smithereens at the foot of Kunlun Mountain by this surge of mana. Not even their true spirits were left behind. They completely disappeared into thin air. And this scene was not only seen by the 5 saints in Kunlun Mountain, but also by the powerful beings who were watching the show. For a moment, the entire world seemed to have fallen into silence. Everyone knew that something big had happened. Bloodshed in the Holy Land was no small matter. There was no doubt that this was done by Feng Zichen. With his strength, coupled with the destiny of the human race, he could easily kill a sage-to-be, not to mention the Daluo Taoist priests. The reason why Feng Zichen did not attack at the beginning but chose to attack at this moment was that he was waiting for them to arrive at Kunlun Mountain. Fortunately, he could kill the 3 of them here in front of the saints. Otherwise, he could not show the dignity of the human race. If the world saw this scene, they would know that if they became enemies with the human race, even the saints would not be able to protect them. In this way, they would definitely be afraid. When they became enemies with the human race again, they would carefully weigh the pros and cons. Feng Zichen's action was intended to intimidate all living beings and make them not dare to be enemies with the human race. It was the same even if they had the backing of the saints. Didn't they see that the 3 Daluo Taoist priests who had the backing of the saints had been killed by Feng Zichen at the door of the saint's house? Killing the chickens to warn the monkeys was like that. The 3 Daluo Taoist priests could live until now because they were the chickens that Feng Zichen prepared to warn the monkeys. You've gone too far. In the Jade Void Palace, seeing the pool of blood at the foot of Kunlun Mountain, the Heavenly Lord of the Origin's face turned blue with anger. The other sages did not look too good either. Feng Zichen had really gone too far this time. His action could be said to have killed the saints' people at their doorstep. This was no longer a slap in the face, but a complete falling out. If the saints did not get back at them, no one in the primordial world would dare to follow them in the future. Die. Filled with hatred, the primeval Lord of Heaven activated his divine will and unleashed his wrath. In an instant, boundless dark clouds gathered at the borders of the human race, dyeing the sky black. Rumble. Within the dark clouds, lightning snakes danced wildly, emitting a destructive aura. The lightning and the dark clouds were all formed from the fury of the primeval Lord of Heaven. When a saint was enraged, heaven and earth would change color. Boom! Endless thunderbolts burst forth and blasted toward the human border. The dazzling light turned the entire world white. At the same time, it also illuminated the horrified faces of the humans below. This was the primeval Lord of Heaven venting his anger. He resonated with heaven and earth and created a heavenly punishment to descend upon the world, wanting to destroy everything. The thunderbolts rumbled and turned into a world-destroying calamity. They wanted to destroy the human border and the millions of human troops stationed there. Obviously, the primeval Lord of Heaven was really angry. Feng Zichen had killed 3 of his subordinates, so he wanted to bury the human army with him. Seeing that the heavenly punishment was about to descend and wipe out the human army, Feng Zichen suddenly stood up in the ancestral land of the human race in this world. Boom! As Feng Zichen stood up, an invisible force rose from his body. In the blink of an eye, it swept through the entire primordial world. Then, time stopped at this moment. Everyone and everything stopped in place, including the heavenly punishment that was about to descend. Fellow primeval Lord of Heaven, are you trying to fall out with me? In the ancestral land, Feng Zichen shouted at the primeval Lord of Heaven from afar. As he spoke, the human Tao Emperor's seal rose from his body and wrapped around his waist, one on the left and one on the right of the human race. So what if I fall out with you? In the face of Feng Zichen's threat, the primeval Lord of Heaven was not afraid. He also raised the Panga banner and faced him from afar. Neither side gave way to the other. A great battle was about to break out. But at this moment, outside the 33 heavens, a treasure suddenly flew out of Jinshio heaven and hung in the sky. It was the Khanate supreme treasure, the cauldron of heaven and earth. At the same time, the Zhoshing diagram appeared in the boundless starry sky. In the celestial court, the phantom of the primeval pagoda of heaven was faintly discernible. Great Emperor Ziwei and the Jade Emperor had made their move. 3 supreme forces descended at the same time, cooperating with Feng Zichen's aura to suppress the primeval Lord of Heaven. Nuwa was undoubtedly on Feng Zichen's side. As for Great Emperor Ziwei and the Jade Emperor, they were both celestial court emperors. They had no reason to help outsiders against their own people. Rumble. At this moment, the great Tao wailed incessantly. The void even showed signs of instability, faintly showing signs of collapsing. Enough, let's end this matter here. Poor Wei and the others have lost this round. At this moment, the Grand Pure One spoke. It was a shocking admission of defeat. As soon as he finished speaking, the primeval Lord of Heaven put away the Panga banner and turned to return to the Jade Void Palace. Seeing this, Feng Zichen and the others also withdrew their auras. After returning to the Jade Void Palace, the primeval Lord of Heaven shouted angrily at the Grand Pure One, "Big brother, what's the meaning of this? A loss is a loss. It's no big deal. The next sentence is to get it back." The Grand Pure One glanced at the primeval Lord of Heaven and said, "Why? Do you really want to fight with Gaochen?" Sigh. Hearing this, the primeval Lord of Heaven was stunned for a moment. He did not say anything and only sighed. This battle was destined not to happen. In the end, it would definitely attract the Tao ancestors' intervention. At that time, both sides would lose face. After a long while, the primeval Lord of Heaven asked unwillingly, "So, this matter is over?" "Of course not. Although this attempt to test the human race has failed, I can see that Gaochen fellow Daoist is still as straightforward as ever. Just because of a disagreement, you fight. How carefree. You should be a role model for our generation. However, it's also because of this that this battle has become more interesting. I just don't know if the carefree Gaochen fellow Daoist can still be carefree in the face of poor Wei's next plan." The Grand Pure One shook his head and said mysteriously. According to him, another plan against the human race had begun. North Sea. North Sea. North Sea, which had been silent since the fall of the ancient heavenly court, suddenly had huge waves. Rumble. In the North Sea, huge waves surged towards the land one after another. Under these huge waves, the figures of countless demon soldiers could be vaguely seen. They were all wearing battle armor and holding spears. Their bodies emitted a terrifying aura. That was the North Sea demon race. They had made a move. The North Sea demon race, who had been silent for many years, stepped out of the North Sea and came to the land in groups. They advanced forward according to the ancient demon army formation. Their target was the human race. The battle between the human race and the demon race had begun. In just a few days, the news of the North Sea demon race's reappearance and their troops in the North Sea spread throughout the primordial world. For a moment, the primordial world was in an uproar. Everyone was shocked by this news. That was the North Sea demon race, a force that had existed since ancient times. It could be said that they were the direct descendants of the ancient demon race. They were also the most powerful force of the demon race now. The North Sea demon race could almost represent the entire demon race now. Their strength was also unimaginably powerful. Just the demon gods of the Daluo Taoist priest's realm were not inferior to 100. After all, not all demons participated in the battle between the liches and the demons. Patriarch Kuanpeng was a shrewd person. How could he let his direct descendants take risks? Therefore, there were not many demon gods of the North Sea demon race who participated in the battle between the liches and the demons. It was also because of this that the North Sea demon race's strength was preserved and they basically did not suffer any losses. And this also caused the prosperity of the North Sea demon race. 100 demon gods coexisted. In ancient times, demon god was the name of the Daluo Taoist priests. P.S. Brothers, I've tried my best. That's all I can write. It's too difficult to write in the hospital. However, this is the last day. After today, we can change people. Chapter 741. In other words, 100 demon gods were 100 Daluo Taoist priests. The foundation of the North Sea demons could be seen from this. If not for Patriarch Kunpeng keeping a low profile and the suppression of the various great gods, the North Sea demons would have been the strongest force in the primordial world after the final battle. If the North Sea demons fought for hegemony then, the human race would have nothing to do. Unfortunately, Patriarch Kunpeng did not dare to come out at that time. Otherwise, he would be besieged by the various great gods of the primordial world. Because at that time, no one wanted to see the demons rise again. Therefore, if Patriarch Kunpeng did not want to be killed, he could only hide in the North Sea. If he missed that opportunity, the North Sea demons would lose the chance to fight for hegemony when the human race rose from the decline. If not, Patriarch Kunpeng would not be in such an awkward situation. Although he had such power, he was far from being as powerful as imagined. He had only just entered the half-step primordial chaos realm. However, if the North Sea demons had chosen to fight for hegemony back then, Patriarch Kunpeng would have had a high chance of becoming a primordial chaos Daluo Jinxian. It was really one step wrong. With the strength of the North Sea demons, it was naturally very easy to deal with the human army stationed in the North Sea. It did not take long for the North Sea demons to break through several human cities and drive straight in. Soon, they arrived at the human race's doorstep. If not for the protection of the 9 states boundary, the North Sea demons would not be able to enter the human territory. Then, the North Sea demons would probably have already attacked the human ancestral land. By the time Feng Zichen received the news, the North Sea demon army had already taken root outside the human territory. Feng Zichen did not know about the North Sea demons' actions in advance, and he did not know immediately afterwards. Because he had been schemed against by the saint. He did not know what method the saint had used, but he had actually blocked Feng Zichen's perception, causing him to completely lose his sense of the outside world. The news that informed Feng Zichen had also been intercepted by the saint with various methods, so he could not be informed in time. As a result, Feng Zichen received news of the North Sea monster spirits a step behind everyone else. All the powerful divines in the untainted land knew that the North Sea monster tribe had attacked the human tribe. However, Feng Zichen, the human emperor, was the last to know. How ironic. This time, Feng Zichen's face was really lost. That's not right. Being schemed against by 5 saints isn't a disgrace. Instead, it's an honor. After all, how many people in the untainted land could receive such treatment? Damn it. Bastard Kunpeng. Goddamn saint. In the human emperor's palace, Feng Zichen, whose face was filled with anger, cursed at the sage and Kunpeng. To him, losing face was not a big deal. The main thing was that things had gone beyond his expectations. He did not expect that the saint would invite the Kunpeng to deal with him. This was really an unexpected move. To be honest, this matter was extremely unbelievable to Feng Zichen. After all, that was the Kunpeng patriarch. How could he be with the saint? Didn't he hate the saint the most? If it weren't for the heavenly lord of the beginning and the 2 saints Shu Ti, the Kunpeng patriarch would have had a share of the saint position in the Purple Cloud Palace. Unfortunately, it was all ruined by the 3 saints. The heavenly lord of the beginning sentence, "How can a person with feathers be the same as me?" completely ruined the Kunpeng patriarch's opportunity to become a saint. For this reason, the Kunpeng patriarch hated the heavenly lord of the beginning and the 3 saints to the core. How could he cooperate with them? Also, what was going on with the heavenly lord of the beginning and the 3 saints Shu Ti? Didn't they look down on the Kunpeng patriarch? Why would they be with him? Sure enough, there were no eternal enemies, only eternal interests. This sentence was applicable everywhere. He didn't know what benefits the saint had promised the Kunpeng patriarch to make him give up his principles and choose to cooperate with them. F*ck. However, although he didn't know the specific deal between the two sides, Feng Zichen could roughly guess. It was nothing more than a promise to help the Kunpeng achieve the Tao. Other than that, the saints had nothing to move the Kunpeng Patriarch. As for the alliance between Feng Zichen and the Kunpeng Patriarch, he didn't take it to heart. How could the Kunpeng Patriarch take it to heart? The Kunpeng Patriarch could even betray Di Juntai, let alone Feng Zichen. The Kunpeng Patriarch's words were just to be taken seriously. Even if it was a great Tao oath, one couldn't believe it. Whoever really believed it would really be a fool. This could be seen from Di Juntai. Look at how they were tricked by the Kunpeng Patriarch during the decisive battle between the liches and demons. At the critical moment of the decisive battle, the Kunpeng Patriarch stole the He Tu and Luo Shu and ran away. This matter, the Kunpeng Patriarch was really cunning. He wasn't afraid that one day, Di Jun would suddenly revive and fight him to the death. Feng Zichen didn't believe it. Back then, when the Kunpeng Patriarch joined the heavenly court, he didn't make any oath. Even if the Kunpeng Patriarch didn't want to, with Di Jun's personality, he would force him to. But even so, the Kunpeng Patriarch still betrayed him. From this, it could be seen that an oath didn't have much binding force on him. This person was already like this to the heavenly court, not to mention the relationship between him and Feng Zichen. It was just a verbal agreement. How could he abide by it? One had to know that when he knew about the three primordial races, the Kunpeng Patriarch had relied on his special background to repeatedly jump between the Scale clan and the Bird clan. When he was a Kun, he was a member of the Water clan. When he was a Peng, he was a member of the Bird clan. Betrayal was a common thing for the Kunpeng Patriarch. Therefore, Feng Zichen had never believed the alliance that the Kunpeng Patriarch had mentioned. Since that was the case, why did he agree to the Kunpeng Patriarch's alliance? That was naturally to dig a hole for the Kunpeng Patriarch. Knowing that the Kunpeng Patriarch didn't keep his word, how could Feng Zichen not be on guard? Although he didn't know how the Kunpeng Patriarch could hide from the perception of the heavenly Tao and make the Tao oath invalid, Feng Zichen knew that his method could hide from the heavenly Tao, but it definitely couldn't hide from the great Tao. Therefore, when he made the alliance agreement with the Kunpeng Patriarch, Feng Zichen had secretly activated the power of his true name and used the true name that was bestowed by the great Tao to make a contract with the Kunpeng Patriarch. In this way, the agreement between the two of them was carried out under the witness of the great Tao. Under the great Tao, it would be fine if the Kunpeng Patriarch abided by the agreement. If he violated it, then the great price could only be paid with his life. And the Kunpeng Patriarch didn't know about this at all. He thought that the agreement this time was the same as before. Because of this, the Kunpeng Patriarch was destined to not be able to escape this calamity. However, Feng Zichen wasn't in a hurry to make a move. The Kunpeng Patriarch hadn't fallen too deep, and there was still room to turn back. Therefore, he was waiting for the Kunpeng Patriarch to personally attack the human race. At that time, there would be no more room to turn things around, and Feng Zichen could send the Kunpeng Patriarch on his way with peace of mind. With a plan in mind, Feng Zichen directly sent out 200 Daluo Taoist priests to guard the borders of the human race's territory and confront the North Sea demon race across space. Don't the North Sea demon race have 100 demon gods? Then the human race will directly send out 200 Daluo Taoist priests to confront you. It was not so easy to make up for the difference of one time. What was called suppressing others with power? This was it. No matter what schemes you have, I will break them with my own strength. After making the deployment, Feng Zichen wasn't in a hurry to appear. Instead, he silently used his divine powers to circulate the aura of weapons and murderous aura between heaven and earth. After the incident with the North Sea demon race, Feng Zichen had already deeply understood that it was still too difficult for him to deal with the 5 saints by himself. Look, the moment the saints attacked, they blinded his perception and made him unable to sense anything at all. It was enough for such a thing to happen once. If it happened again and again, it would really become a fatal thing. However, Feng Zichen really didn't have a good way to solve this kind of thing. Because they relied on their strength that far exceeded his to forcefully block his perception. Therefore, other than being stronger than them, there was no good way. Because of this, Feng Zichen thought about it and decided to be straightforward. Since he couldn't stop this kind of thing from happening, then he might as well make everyone lose the ability to deduce the heavenly secrets together. In this way, everyone would be on the same level. Whether they won or lost would depend on their own methods. It was difficult to fight against the 5 saints with his own strength, but it wasn't difficult to make everyone lose the ability to deduce the heavenly secrets together. Especially at this time, it was even simpler. Every time a calamity happened, the heavenly Tao would lose its perception of the eldritch world. Then, all living beings would be free to do what they wanted to do to settle the karma between heaven and earth. This was also the reason why the heavenly Tao didn't appear when everyone was fighting to the death during the calamity, even if heaven and earth were to be broken. If the heavenly Tao couldn't sense the situation in the eldritch world, how could it appear to stop them? It could only wait for the calamity to end, and it could sense the situation in heaven and earth again before coming out to clean up the mess. The phenomenon of the heavenly Tao appearing after the destruction of the eldritch world was born because of this. This was also because it was affected by the calamity. If it was during normal times, the heavenly Tao would have appeared to stop everyone before they started fighting. For example, there were a few times before when Feng Zichen planned to have a decisive battle with the saints. However, at the crucial moment, he would be interrupted by the heavenly Tao. Things like destroying heaven and earth would only happen during the calamity. During normal times, they couldn't even fight, let alone destroy heaven and earth. After knowing the reason, he could make use of it, just like what Feng Zichen wanted to do now. He wanted to use the murderous aura and the aura of weapons that filled heaven and earth as a guide to affect the tribulation aura that was suppressed by the saints, so that it would spread between heaven and earth. When the concentration of the tribulation aura between heaven and earth rose to a certain level, the heavenly Tao would naturally lose its perception of the eldritch world. After the heavenly Tao lost its perception of the eldritch world, all living beings would be free. True freedom. They could do whatever they wanted. They didn't have to worry about being targeted by the heavenly Tao. Similarly, the deduction method that relied on the heavenly Tao had completely lost its effect during the period when the heavenly Tao was fading. Even the saints couldn't deduce anything during the calamity. If not, how could the Jie school of the later generations lose so miserably? His disciples went to die one after another, but the Grand Master of Heaven didn't react at all. Wasn't it because he couldn't predict the situation of his disciples? He thought that his disciples were all following his instructions and chanting in their cave abodes. The North Star Emperor was the master of war. Controlling the power of weapons between heaven and earth was Feng Zichen's responsibility. For this reason, when he used his power of the heavenly Tao, the aura of weapons between heaven and earth swept across the entire eldritch world like a storm. Boom! 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 Under the impact of the aura of weapons and the murderous aura, heaven and earth started to tremble. Then, wisps of tribulation aura appeared in the void and gradually spread between heaven and earth in an uncontrollable manner. Damn it! What's that bastard North Star doing? How dare he do this? The saints immediately sensed the change in heaven and earth. Then, their faces darkened. They were all smart people, so they naturally guessed Feng Zichen's plan immediately. As the tribulation aura spread, the primordial divination lost its effect. It was obviously disadvantageous to the saints. This was because if the saints worked together, they could make Feng Zichen lose his ability to deduce the heavenly secrets. However, Feng Zichen couldn't make them lose their ability to deduce the heavenly secrets. This was the advantage of the saints. However, as the tribulation aura spread between heaven and earth, this advantage of the saints no longer existed. Seeing that their advantage was about to disappear, it would be strange if they were happy. Unfortunately, even if they guessed Feng Zichen's plan, they couldn't stop it. Since the tribulation aura had already appeared, they couldn't suppress it anymore. Otherwise, when the tribulation aura backfired, even the saints wouldn't feel good. The North Star Emperor is still as powerful as ever. Sensing the change in heaven and earth, everyone exclaimed. The saints had just schemed against the North Star Emperor, and he returned the favor. Such a powerful stance was really enviable. In the Eldritch world, there weren't many who dared to slap the saints in the face. As for the North Star Emperor, he was the only one who felt that it wasn't enough after one slap and wanted to continue slapping the saints. He was so powerful that he could be called the #1 face-slapping saint in the Eldritch world. The tribulation aura continued to spread between heaven and earth. Although it hadn't reached the point where it could cover the heavenly path, it wouldn't take long. At this time, anyone who had some knowledge knew that the calamity was about to descend, and it was time to start preparing. When the calamity completely descended, those who had grudges could take revenge and those who had grievances could complain. Fellow Taoist North Star Emperor is really ruthless. Since that's the case, don't blame the poor Wei and the others for being ruthless. In the Jade Mirage Palace, the 5 saints gradually calmed down after a short period of anger. At the same time, they were also thinking of a way to counterattack. Since the North Star Emperor had already made his move, they had to counterattack to avoid being ridiculed. And their way of fighting back was simple. Chapter 742. That was heaven and earth isolation. Millions of years ago, Emperor Xuanxu followed the will of heaven and earth and developed the Sea of Laws, establishing the situation of the human race ruling the primordial world in one fell swoop. But now, the role of the Sea of Laws had been understood by the world. It might have restrictions on ordinary cultivators, but to important figures, it was almost like a decoration. There were too many ways to avoid it. Look at now, the various races in the primordial world were constantly conquering, but no one was forcefully led to the heaven realm. This meant that the world already had a way to avoid the Sea of Laws. But even so, it only meant that the Sea of Laws had lost its effect, not that heaven and earth isolation had lost its effect. With the Sea of Laws between heaven and earth, there were still many people in the heaven realm who could not come down. But the human race could come and go freely. This was the advantage of the human race. The current situation was that the human race could go up, but they were unwilling to go up. The heaven realm wanted to come down, but they could not. Therefore, what the saints wanted to do was to eliminate the advantage of the human race, reopen the passage between heaven and earth, and abolish the heaven and earth isolation. One had to know that after Emperor Xuanxu severed the heaven and earth isolation, apart from a small portion of the innate races who were enemies of the human race, most of them entered the heaven realm. They cultivated and recuperated in the heaven realm, secretly accumulating strength in order to counterattack the human race in the future and reoccupy the primordial world. But the Sea of Law was placed horizontally there, completely blocking off the passageway for them to counterattack. No matter how they increased their strength, it was useless if they could not come down. In the current world, the North Sea demon race attacked the human race and delayed most of the human race's energy. It was a good opportunity for them to counterattack the human race. If they missed this opportunity, with the strength of the heavenly realm's races, they would never have any hope of counterattacking the human race. Unfortunately, they could not come down. However, if the heaven and earth isolation was broken, the situation would be completely different. The heavenly realm's races could take advantage of the war between the North Sea demon race and the human race to attack the human race's rear and stab the human race ruthlessly. In this way, the human race would be attacked from both sides. In this case, the human race would be in danger. If they were not careful, they would risk shaking their foundation. The heavenly realm's races were one of the backup plans used by the saints to deal with the human race. Removing the heaven and earth isolation was also one of the saints' plans. However, although they had this plan, they did not intend to use it at this time. According to the saints' original plan, he was prepared to take advantage of the worsening situation between the North Sea monsters and the human race to activate this trump card. But now, Feng Zichen had triggered the power of the killing calamity, erasing their advantage and causing them to fall into a passive state. The sages had no choice but to launch this backup plan in advance to offset the adverse effects of Feng Zichen's actions on them. Fellow Taoists, please make your move. Inside the Jade Void Palace, after the 5 sages had finished their preparations, they summoned their magic treasures at the same time and blasted them towards the Sea of Laws. If it were normal times, they naturally would not dare to make a move against the Sea of Law. If they really did that, the heavenly Tao would be the first to not spare them. However, things were different now. It was all thanks to Feng Zichen that the tribulation aura filled the world and blinded the perception of the heavenly Tao. And this also gave the sage the opportunity to attack the Sea of Law. If the heavenly Tao could not see the primordial world, what were they afraid of? If they were unhappy with the Sea of Law, they could just blast it over. There was nothing that could not be solved with a blast. If there was, then it must be that the blast was not thorough enough. Boom! 5 resplendent rainbows rose from Mount Kunlun and collided with the Sea of Laws between heaven and earth. Rumble. There was a shocking explosion, and the Sea of Law that had been between heaven and earth for millions of years shattered with a bang, turning into boundless connate chi that fell onto the primordial world. Whoosh! At this moment, on the primordial world, there was a sweet rain and heavenly flowers falling. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth skyrocketed at an unimaginable speed. In the blink of an eye, it had become more than 100 times richer, and it continued to rise at a terrifying speed. One had to know that the sudden increase in spiritual chi was not acquired chi, but extremely pure connate chi. The Sea of Law had existed for millions of years, and who knew how much connate spiritual chi it had accumulated. Now that it had exploded, the connate spiritual chi was swept into the primordial world, and the changes it brought to it could be imagined. Under the nourishment of the connate spiritual chi, the primordial world recovered and gave birth to countless vitality. Immortal fruits and immortal herbs rose from the ground, and spiritual treasures and spiritual objects slowly took shape. There were also countless birds, beasts, fish, insects, flowers, and trees. Under the nourishment of the connate chi, they were able to give birth to spiritual wisdom and take form. Of course, among them, the ones who benefited the most were the humans. When the connate chi was swept back, countless humans were able to break through, from mortals to immortals, and their cultivation improved by a step. It was as if the spiritual chi had recovered. Looking at the connate chi that filled the world, if it were not for the fact that the acquired path was still in power and not the connate path that dominated everything, everyone would have thought that the connate era had returned. After the saint's attack broke through the Sea of Law, it did not dissipate. Instead, it continued to attack upward and blasted into the unknown void. The Sea of Law had been broken, but it did not mean that isolation of heaven and earth had been broken. This was because the Sea of Law was only a heaven and earth barrier created by Great Emperor Ziwei when he channeled the power of heaven and earth. It was not the main body of isolation of heaven and earth. The main body of isolation of heaven and earth was still the fate of the humans in the unseen world. Only by repelling the fate of the humans that shrouded between heaven and earth would isolation of heaven and earth be completely broken. Only then would the passageway between the two realms be connected, allowing everyone to come and go. Although the fate of the humans was strong, how could it fight against the joint forces of 5 saints? Not to mention, the fate that shrouded between heaven and earth was only a part of the fate of the humans. It was even more impossible to fight against the saints. With a boom, the portion of the fate of the humans that shrouded between heaven and earth was repelled by the saints. It rumbled back and merged with the fate of the humans once again. Rumble. At this moment, the fate of the humans shook violently. The 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors who were guarding the fire cloud cave used all their strength to suppress this tremor. The fate of the humans that had been cut off from the return of heaven and earth soared. Feng Zichen's strength naturally rose as well and became stronger. Oh no! We've been tricked. The moment they saw the Sea of Law shatter and the innate spirit chi return, the 5 saints in the Jade Void Palace understood that they had been tricked by Feng Zichen. He had long known that someone would destroy isolation of heaven and earth, so he had made arrangements inside in advance. He was waiting for someone to destroy isolation of heaven and earth, so that the innate spirit chi inside would return to heaven and earth to increase the strength of the humans. Gao Chenghua is so cunning. After understanding that they had been tricked, the saints' faces darkened. After isolation of heaven and earth was broken, the advantage of the humans was erased, but it also caused the growth of the human strength to enter a spurt period. It was hard to tell whether it was good or bad. Fortunately, isolation of heaven and earth was broken by them in the end. Haha. In the human emperor palace, Feng Zichen could not help but laugh out loud when he felt the soaring fate of the humans. To be honest, Feng Zichen really did not expect that the saints would destroy isolation of heaven and earth. However, he knew that sooner or later, someone would not be able to resist attacking the Sea of Laws. There was no other reason than isolation of heaven and earth was too much of a hindrance and affected the freedom of some people. Therefore, from the beginning, isolation of heaven and earth was destined to not last long. To be honest, isolation of heaven and earth could last for more than 10 million years, which was already greatly beyond Feng Zichen's expectations. The great divine masters of the untainted land were more tolerant than he had imagined. Since he had long expected that the Sea of Laws would be destroyed, how could Feng Zichen not make preparations early? He secretly used a method to turn the entire Sea of Laws into spirit chi, waiting for it to break so that he could give back to heaven and earth. He did not expect that a casual move back then would actually plot against the saints. It was really fate. It was a pity that the innate spirit chi was rootless. Although there was a lot of it, under the consumption of countless cultivators, it would be exhausted in at most 10,000 years. However, it was also good to be able to last for 10,000 years. It was enough to bring about a lot of changes to this world. When isolation of heaven and earth disappeared, the cultivators of the heaven realm immediately sensed it. Then, they knew that their chance to counterattack the untainted land had come. Therefore, under the lead of the 10 Daluo Taoist priests, more than 100 innate races in the heaven realm secretly descended to the lower realm, planning to take advantage of the human race's unpreparedness to give them a ruthless blow. These were the innate 100 races, which could also be called the heaven realm's 100 races. This race thought that their actions were extremely secretive and that no one would notice. However, they did not know that their actions were all seen by the 3 emperors, Great Emperor Ziwei, Jade Emperor, and Great Emperor of the South Pole. As the masters of the heaven realm, if someone was causing trouble under their noses and they could not detect it, then they would be a little useless as emperors. In the Hall of Enlightenment of the Heavenly Court, the 3 emperors of the Heavenly Court gathered together and silently watched the actions of the 100 races. Fellow Daoist Ziwei, do you want to help fellow Daoist Gaochen? The current situation of the human race is not very optimistic. With the addition of the innate 100 races, the human race is really in danger. Suddenly, Jade Emperor turned his head and said to Great Emperor Ziwei. After the death of Gaochen, Haotian had stopped the 2 great emperors of the Ziwei and South Pole from avenging him. Haotian had always felt guilty towards him. Therefore, now that he saw that Gaochen was in trouble, Haotian wanted to help him without hesitation to clear his thoughts. Cultivation, 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 cultivation was about freedom. If one's thoughts were not clear, how could one cultivate the Tao? It was because of this that Haotian did not hesitate to stand on the side of Gaochen in this war. It was not for anything else but to clear his thoughts. Right now, Haotian really did not have any desires. He was just waiting to break through to primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian so that he could step down from his position as Celestial Emperor and live a carefree life. No need. In the ancient times, the 10,000 races joined forces and still could not defeat the human race. Now that there are only 100 races left, they are even less of a match for the human race. We don't need to worry about Gaochen. If he is no match for the human race, he will naturally ask for our help. Great Emperor Ziwei shook his head and said. That's true. Haotian thought about it and agreed. He nodded and did not say anything else. These 100 races are quite interesting. They eat what belongs to the heavenly realm and use what belongs to the heavenly realm. Now, under the command of an outsider, they are becoming enemies with the heavenly court. Well done. At this moment, Great Emperor of the South Pole spoke. The moment he opened his mouth, he expressed his dissatisfaction with the 100 races. Indeed, these 100 races do not know how to appreciate favors. Our heavenly court has raised them for nearly 10 million years. Even a cold sword should be warmed up by now. But look at what they have done. It's just a sentence from the sage, and they can't wait to rush to the mortal realm and become enemies with fellow cultivator Gaochen. Their actions are really disappointing. I wonder what benefits the sage has given them to make them act like this. Haotian's expression turned ugly when he heard Great Emperor of the South Pole's words. The 100 races did not have a good life in the heavenly realm, but the three of them definitely did not make things difficult for them. They treated them equally. But look at how they repaid the heavenly court. At this moment, they did not go down to the mortal realm to help great Emperor Gaochen. Instead, they became enemies with him. How could this not make the three of them feel disappointed? Actually, to Haotian, it was not a big deal for the 100 races to go down to the mortal realm to deal with the human race. What he really could not tolerate was that the 100 races followed the sage's orders to go down to the mortal realm. This was the heavenly realm, his territory. The 100 races did not listen to his orders and instead listened to the sage's orders. What did this mean? It meant that the 100 races did not take him, the celestial emperor, seriously at all. Especially now, when Haotian and the sage had completely fallen out. The 100 races' actions were like a slap to his face. Even if Haotian had no desires, he could not stand this grievance. One could imagine the anger in his heart. A group of ungrateful wretches. They are indeed annoying, great Emperor Ziwei nodded and said. We can't let this group of people stay. Even if it's not to help fellow cultivator Gaochen, we can't let them stay. Otherwise, if we allow them to go down to the mortal realm, the other races in the heaven realm will follow suit. How can we rule the heaven realm with dignity? At that time, it will be hard to say whether we or the sage will be in charge of the heaven realm. After hearing the two's words, Haotian made a decision in his heart. The 100 races could not be allowed to stay. Otherwise, it would not be enough to intimidate the 10,000 races in the heaven realm. In the heaven realm, any race that was related to the sage should be killed on sight. Only then would they know who the master of the heaven realm was. After that, they would understand what to do in the future. What you said makes sense. Then, should we send people to bring the heavenly soldiers and intercept them? Hearing this, the corners of great Emperor Ziwei's eyes twitched. He knew that Haotian had the intention to kill. The 100 races were too impatient and had narrowed the path ahead of them. If they had known this before they went down to the mortal realm and reported to Haotian, such an incident would not have happened. TSK, there's no need to go through so much trouble. Haotian shook his head. With a thought, a destructive tide suddenly appeared between heaven and earth. It swept toward the army of the 100 races that was passing through the passage of heaven and earth. P.S. A warm celebration of the first anniversary of this book. I originally planned to add more chapters today. But there was a sudden accident and I had to stay in the hospital for 3 days and 2 nights. So I had to change the plan. The plan to add more chapters will probably start tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. Brothers, please forgive me. Chapter 743. At this moment, under the lead of the 10 Daluo Taoist priests, the 100 primordial clans were rushing to the human world in high spirits. They were completely unaware that danger had already arrived. Rumble. Very suddenly, the tide of destruction struck and swept everything around it. Even though the 10 Taoist priests reacted in time, half of the primordial clans were still swallowed by the mighty wave of destruction and completely disappeared. Boom! After the first tide of destruction, the second tide of destruction followed closely behind, and its power was several times stronger than the first tide of destruction. Even the 10 Taoist priests felt a sense of fear from the bottom of their hearts when they saw it, and they felt that they would die in it. Break for the poor way. Frightened, the 10 Taoist priests chose to risk their lives. The vast mana surged out of their bodies and turned into powerful magic, bombarding the tide of destruction one after another. They wanted to use this method to stop the tide of destruction's advance. Unfortunately, their struggle was completely useless. With their cultivation level, how could they fight against Haotian, who was infinitely close to the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian? If Haotian wanted them to die, they had no other choice but to die. Unless an existence far superior to Haotian intervened and saved them. The magic of the 10 Taoist priests bombarded the tide of destruction, but other than making it stronger, it had no other effect. No. Seeing this, the 10 Taoist priests couldn't help but have a look of despair in their eyes. However, although they were desperate, they were unwilling to die just like that. They seemed to have grasped the last life-saving straw and shouted desperately, "Saint, save me!" The voice was so loud that it spread throughout the entire untainted land in an instant. The saint in the Jade Mirage Palace immediately heard it and looked in the direction of the voice. Seeing that the tide of destruction was about to swallow all the 100 primordial clans, including the 10 Taoist priests, the saint had made his move. Haotian, how dare you? An angry voice came from the Kunlun Mountains. Then, the Tri-Jade Rui flew high into the sky and turned into a stream of light. It broke through the layers of the void and blasted into the tide of destruction, shattering it into pieces and saving the Khan 800 races. You're courting death. Seeing the primeval Lord of Heaven make a move, Hao Tian was naturally furious. Without further ado, he tossed out the supreme grade innate spirit treasure, the clear sky godly sword, and slashed at the 100 innate beings. At the same time, Great Emperor Ziwei and the Great Emperor of the South Pole also attacked. Swoosh boundless starlight appeared and turned into a myriad manifestation Rui that blasted toward the Khan 800 races. On the other side, the heavenly punishment divine eye shot out coldly, unleashing countless light of calamity that covered the sky and rained down on the innate 100 races. The heavenly courts were strong, and the saints were not willing to fall behind. The Tri-Jade Rui spun and met the Wanxiang Jade Rui. At the same time, the Qingping sword and the coiling dragon cane flew out from the Kunlun mountain one after another, each facing the Haotian divine sword and the heavenly punishment divine eye. After that, the wonderful tree of 7 treasures and the guiding divine banner quietly appeared, sweeping up the 100 races who were still alive and were about to leave. How dare you? Seeing this, the 3 great emperors naturally did not let it go. They stood up from their thrones and attacked the 5 saints with all their might. Rumble. Amidst the shocking explosion, an earth-shattering battle broke out. However, the battle came and went quickly. As the 100 races were rescued by the saints, the sudden battle came to an end. The heavenly courts were fighting 3 against 5, so they were naturally no match for the saints. It was normal for the 100 races to be rescued. However, even if they were rescued, the 100 races did not have a good time. Being in the center of the primordial chaos battlefield, even with the full protection of the saints, it was impossible for them to be safe. Although the 100 races were still around, their strength was already less than 10%. Even the 10 Daluo Taoist priests were all injured. As for the 100 races of the Xiantian realm, it could be said that they had died before they were born. They had not even reached the mortal world, but they were already almost dead. Just the word tragic was enough to describe it. Not only was the strength that they had secretly accumulated over the years to deal with the humans gone, but even their original strength was almost gone. The current 100 races were not even as strong as those who had just ascended to the heavenly courts. Bastards, a bunch of bastards, they've gone too far. In the Hall of Enlightenment, Haotian could not help but curse. At the same time, he wanted to make a move and wipe out the remaining strength of the 100 races in the heavenly realm. However, at this moment, Great Emperor Ziwei stepped in to stop him. Hey, fellow Daoist Haotian, please calm down. Fellow Daoist, you've already made a move once just now. If you continue to make a move now, you'll inevitably be ridiculed. Great Emperor Ziwei shook his head and said. It was just a deal with a small 100 races. It was fine if they failed to wipe them out once, but they still had to make a move a second time. If this spread out, it was inevitable that people would say that the heavenly courts were incompetent. Then we'll just let this matter go? Haotian said unwillingly. No. There are tens of thousands of races in the heavenly realm. The saints can mobilize the 100 races, but they definitely can't mobilize the 10,000 races. Since the 100 races have chosen to betray the heavenly courts and join the saints, then we don't have to be merciful. Let the 10,000 races deal with them. Great Emperor Ziwei said slowly as he glanced in the direction of the heavenly realm. The 100 races were not all of the heavenly realm. They were just a part of it. Moreover, not everyone in the heavenly realm was willing to be the lackey of the saints. There were many races that belonged to the 3 emperors. After thinking for a while, Haotian asked, what if they refuse? Refuse? Fellow Daoist, you have to know that this is the heavenly realm, our territory. Since they live here, they have to obey our rule. If they don't obey, what's the difference between them and the 100 races? Such people can't be left alive. Hearing this, Great Emperor Zue was silent for a long time before he said slowly. Yes, those who obey us are our people. Those who don't obey us, what does that have to do with us? What right do they have to stay in the heavenly realm? Great Emperor of the South Pole also said. Yes, the two of you are right. It's the poor Wei who misunderstood. After listening to the two of them, Haotian seemed to have understood something. Then, an order jointly issued by the three emperors spread from the Lingxiao Palace and spread throughout the heavenly realm. The 100 races of the Khanate realm had betrayed the heavenly court and ordered the races of the heavenly realm to attack them together. As soon as this order was issued, the people of the heavenly realm immediately became anxious. The races that were enemies of the 100 races took this opportunity to mobilize their troops and occupy the territories left behind by the 100 races. As for the heavenly court, they mobilized the elites of the heavenly realm and formed an army. In a few days, they would go to the lower realm and conquer the 100 races of the Khanate realm that had betrayed them. As for the Khanate races that were unwilling to attack the 100 races of the Khanate realm, they were either chased out of the heavenly realm or dealt with together. From now on, the heavenly realm only needed one voice. That was the voice of the heavenly court. Putting aside the matter of the heavenly realm, the war at the border of the human territory gradually became more intense. This time, Great Ancestor Kunpeng was determined to become enemies with the human clan. Not only did he mobilize hundreds of demon gods, but he also brought out the foundation of the North Sea Demon Clan. They were the elites of the North Sea Demon Clan from the ancient times. What were the elites of the North Sea Demon Clan? They were the elites of the Demon Clan from the ancient times. In the ancient times, only the most outstanding Tai Jingxian were qualified to become the elites of the Demon Clan. Not only did they have powerful cultivation techniques and divine powers, but they were also equipped with powerful Dharma treasures. They ranged from supreme-grade acquired cardinal treasures to Khanate spirit treasures. In the past, the vanguard sent by the demon race to attack the human race was known as the inferior demon soldiers. Each of them had the cultivation base of a primordial immortal, let alone the elites of the demon race who were even stronger. The weakest had the cultivation of Tai Jingxian, and the strongest had already stepped into the half-step Daluo realm. Moreover, these demon clans were all ancient demon clans. Since they were from the primordial demon clan, there was no doubt that they cultivated the Khanate Dao. After all, the ancient times were still the Khanate era, and there was no room for the postnatal Dao to survive. If one counted carefully, the elites of the North Sea Demon Clan had 1,000 half-step Daluo and 1,000,000 Tai Dao lords. At the peak of the North Sea Demon Clan, there were definitely more than these Demon Clan elites. There were even 100 million of them. However, no matter how capable Great Ancestor Kunpeng was, it was impossible for him to hide 100 million North Sea elites in front of Dijun Tai. In fact, Great Ancestor Kunpeng couldn't even keep 1,000,000 elites. Now, the reason why there were so many North Sea elites was because he had spent all these years nurturing them. To put it bluntly, excluding Daluo Jingxian, the strength of the North Sea Demon Clan was 30 to 40% of the human clan's strength, even if they couldn't compare to the human clan. Strong, they were really too strong. The North Sea Demon Clan elites attacked the human clan. If not for the protection of the 9 states barrier, the human clan army would have been scattered by the demon clan army. In fact, with the current strength of the human clan, it wasn't impossible for them to gather 1,000,000 Tai Dao lords. However, even if they could, Feng Zichen couldn't let them fight the demon clan elites here. After all, the human clan's territory was too large and there were too many places that needed to be guarded. Feng Zichen couldn't transfer too many experts to deal with the North Sea elites. Otherwise, the North Sea Demon Clan would be repelled, but the rest of the human clan would be in trouble. It was also because the war between the two clans had not entered the final stage. Otherwise, no matter how strong the North Sea Demon Clan elites were, it would be difficult for them to defeat the human clan. If the 500 Daluo Taoist priests of the human clan attacked together, they would be able to sweep everything away. Unfortunately, at this moment, the Daluo Taoist priests of the human clan and the Daluo Taoist priests of the demon clan could only confront each other and not attack. Otherwise, what awaited them would be the joint attack of all the great divine abilities of the primordial world. If hundreds of Daluo Taoist priests were to fight, their destructive power would be enough to cause irreparable damage to the primordial world. Therefore, in order to protect the primordial world, such a large-scale battle was not allowed to happen. Once violated, the entire world would suffer. Of course, this agreement only restricted the great divine abilities and the Daluo Taoist priests. It didn't bind the saints and the primordial chaos Tao master. Who could be stronger than them? Apart from that, when the great divine abilities and the Daluo Taoist priests were forced into a corner, they could also violate this agreement. That's right. If they were about to die or their clans were about to be destroyed, there was no need to abide by this agreement. They could fight with their lives on the line and perish together with their opponents. However, this was only allowed to happen under extreme circumstances. Under normal circumstances, the Daluo Taoist priests would not fight. In other words, unless the human clan was in a life-and-death crisis or the North Sea demon clan was about to be destroyed by the human clan, the Daluo Taoist priests of the two clans could only fight to the death. At other times, the Daluo Taoist priests could only serve as a deterrent, but they could not be used on a large scale. Just like the nuclear weapons of the later generations, their deterrence was more important than their practical use. They would not be used easily. The Daluo Taoist priests could not take action, and the human clan's forces were too scattered. It was really difficult to deal with the demon clan's elites in a short time. Feng Zichen could only try his best to draw out troops from other places of the human clan to stabilize the situation at the border. This would take time. Although the human clan's armies were large, they all had missions and could not be mobilized as and when Feng Zichen wanted. They needed to be carefully coordinated before they could draw out a portion of their forces to reinforce the border. After all, the human clan's current opponents were not just the demon clan. There were too many places where they needed to deploy troops. Fortunately, with the boundary of the Nine Province, the North Sea demon clan could not invade the human clan's territory and could only circle around outside. The human clan's army relied on the boundary of the Nine Province to make the North Sea demon clan suffer a lot and lose a lot of their strength. On this day, Feng Zichen was in the human emperor's palace thinking of a way to deal with the demon clan when he suddenly felt an extremely oppressive aura emerge from outside the human clan's territory. Surprised, Feng Zichen looked up and saw a giant claw that blotted out the sky. It reached down from the heavens and viciously slammed into the human clan's territory. With a boom, the giant claw slammed into the boundary of the Nine Province, causing it to shake violently. Then, with a snap sound, the seemingly indestructible spirit formation of the Nine Provinces shattered with a loud bang. The boundary of the Nine Province was broken. The boundary of the Nine Province that had protected the human clan for millions of years was broken. At this moment, most of the human clan's hearts were filled with fear. However, Feng Zichen was unmoved. Looking at the giant claw that was slowly disappearing in the air, Feng Zichen said in an inexplicable tone, "Kunpeng, you finally couldn't help but make a move." That giant claw was undoubtedly the work of the Kunpeng Patriarch. Of course, it might not be the work of the Kunpeng Patriarch. The boundary of the Nine Province of the human clan was maintained with the lives of the 9 great divine masters. It was not that Feng Zichen looked down on the Kunpeng Patriarch, but with his current strength, he definitely could not break the boundary of the Nine Province unless he had a connate cardinal treasure. After all, the strength of the 9 great divine masters was not a bluff. It was real. They might not be a match for the Kunpeng Patriarch one-on-one, but 9 against 1, they could definitely beat him to the ground. Even so, the Kunpeng Patriarch still broke the boundary of the Nine Province with one strike. It would be strange if there was no problem. There must be more than one saint helping him in secret. It was not that Feng Zichen was boasting, but with the strength of the boundary of the Nine Province, it was impossible for the saint to break it in a short time without using the power of the Way of Heaven. Chapter 744. At the very least, it couldn't be done in one move. Of course, this referred to a sage. If several sages joined forces, they could indeed break the boundary of the 9 provinces in one move. Just like the current situation. Alas, what a pity, Kunpeng. Feng Zichen sighed and said with a little pity. The great ancestor Kuan-Peng had chosen to be his enemy and had embarked on a dead end. Standing up from the throne, Feng Zichen released his divine thought and tried to restore the boundary of the 9 provinces. But at this moment, he encountered resistance. As the 9 cauldrons trembled, 5 supreme powers appeared. They firmly imprisoned 5 of the cauldrons, causing them to be unable to connect with the other 4 cauldrons. That was the power of the 5 sages. They hid their magic in the giant claws of the great ancestor Kuan-Peng. While helping him break the boundary of the 9 provinces, they also secretly penetrated the core of the boundary of the 9 provinces, where the 9 cauldrons were. Rumble. No matter how the remaining 4 cauldrons trembled, they could not break through the blockade of the sage's power and awaken the 5 cauldrons that were sealed. With the 5 cauldrons sealed, the chi of the 9 cauldrons could not be connected. The power of the boundary of the 9 provinces was reduced by half. Go! With a thought, a majestic power gushed out of Feng Zichen's body and blasted toward the 9 cauldrons to help them break the blockade of the 5 sages. Rumble. At this moment, the human domain began to shake violently. 2 supreme forces clashed and collided in the depths of the earth, causing devastating shockwaves to surge out. After a few breaths, Feng Zichen withdrew his power with a dignified face. He had to admit that with his own strength, even with the help of the 9 cauldrons, he was far from being a match for the 5 sages. He could not shake the power of the 5 sages at all to help the 9 cauldrons break the seal. It seems that the boundary of the 9 provinces cannot be used in a short time, Feng Zichen sighed and said helplessly. Although he was helpless, his tone was not too surprised. That's right, it was expected. The sages had broken the boundary of the 9 provinces. How could they let Feng Zichen repair it in a short time? Then what was the meaning of the saints' intervention? However, although the power left behind by the 5 saints had sealed the 5 cauldrons, this was only temporary. Their powers were ultimately rootless duckweeds that would slowly be obliterated by the 9 cauldrons over time and become nutrients for their growth. At that time, the barrier of the 9 provinces would reappear in an even stronger form. This was inevitable and irreversible, but it required time. At least 1,000 years, and at most 10,000 years. During this period of time, the barrier of the 9 province had completely lost its function. No matter what race they were, they could freely enter and leave the borders of the human race. The moment the boundary of the 9 states shattered, the elites of the North Sea moved. Like a sharp sword, they directly pierced through the human army and rushed into the human territory. If the reinforcements from other places had not arrived in time and joined forces with the human army to block the North Sea elites, they would have been able to charge straight into the ancestral land of the human race. Troublesome. In the human emperor palace, Feng Zichen could not help but shake his head when he saw the scene outside the border. He was very disappointed with the performance of the human army. Even if the North Sea elites were very strong, without the barrier of the 9 provinces, the human army could not be so easily broken through. This behavior could no longer be described as incompetent. Alas, the human race is really getting worse with each generation. Shaking his head in disappointment, Feng Zichen said. Now his expression was like a high school teacher complaining that they were the worst class he had taught. It's a pity that the human race of the mini-primitive world can't appear in the primitive world for the time being. Otherwise, how could the North Sea elites have the chance to be arrogant? Inexplicably, Feng Zichen thought of the human race in the mini-primitive world. That was the real elite of the human race. Their strength was not weaker than the elite of the demon race at all. In fact, they were even stronger. However, that was Feng Zichen's last trump card. He had to use it at the most critical moment to give the saint a surprise. It would be a waste to use it on the North Sea elites now. Wait, he still had to wait. When the saint thought that victory was in his hands, it would be time for the real elites of the human race to appear. Now, the battle between Feng Zichen and the saint was to reveal each other's trump cards. It was to see who had more hidden trump cards and who was stronger. Whoever used up their trump cards first would have lost most of this battle. Although he was very disappointed with the young people of the human race, Feng Zichen could not really leave them alone. If the human race's frontline army was really defeated by the North Sea elites, then the ordinary humans in the human race's territory would suffer. The North Sea demons would not pity them. They would definitely turn them into blood food to become resources for their own improvement. Therefore, out of consideration for the mortals in the human territory, Feng Zichen decided to reveal a trump card. He released his divine consciousness, crossed the endless void, and came to a battlefield full of devastation. Here, broken flags fluttered, the sky was stained with blood, there were traces of a great battle everywhere, and there were countless corpses on the ground. There were monsters, dragons, phoenix, humans, and so on. This battlefield was one of the main battlefields of the monster race's war against the humans in the ancient times. It could be said that apart from the battle in the human Dao imperial court, this was the most tragic battle. The battle was so tragic that not only did most of the experts of the three races and the human race die here, but even a great treasure of the human race was lost here. One could see a broken section of the city wall in the center of the battlefield. It was buried in the endless yellow sand, allowing the passage of time to sweep past it. Whoosh, a gust of wind blew past, stirring up sand into the air, revealing the mottled section of the city wall. Silent desolation and tragedy were the first feelings that the section of the city wall gave off. It was like a book of history, recording the rise and fall of a race. This was the immortal dragon city, a great treasure of the human race in the past. It was said to be the strongest defense of the human race, protecting the stability of the human race. Unfortunately, that battle had been too tragic. Even the immortal dragon city, which was said to be indestructible, had been destroyed. The strongest defense of the human race still couldn't protect the human race in the end. Before the final battle between the human race and the monster race, it had been destroyed in that battle. Immortal Dragon City, we meet again. Feng Zichen said with nostalgia as he walked to the side of the Immortal Dragon City's ruins. The current Immortal Dragon City had long been destroyed beyond recognition. There was no trace of its former glory. However, Feng Zichen could feel that the spirit of the Immortal Dragon City was still there. The spirit of protecting the human race. The Immortal Dragon City's strength had never been its body, but its spirit of protecting the human race. This was because it was the physical manifestation of the human race's will. Back then, Feng Zichen had used his unparalleled abilities to extract the part of the human race's will that was related to protection and materialized it into the Immortal Dragon City, the supreme treasure of the human race. Why was the Immortal Dragon City called immortal? It was because of this. As long as the human race's will was not destroyed, the Immortal Dragon City would not be destroyed. Therefore, it was naturally called immortal. Although the Immortal Dragon City had been destroyed, as long as it was awakened and connected to the human race's will, it could instantly recover and become even stronger than before. Feng Zichen had come here today to awaken the Immortal Dragon City. It had been asleep for too long. It was time to wake up. Immortal Dragon City, the human race needs your protection again. So, wake up and continue to fulfill your mission to protect the human race. In front of the Immortal Dragon City, Feng Zichen cut his palm and dripped his blood onto the walls of the Immortal Dragon City. Rumble. As the Emperor's blood entered the Immortal Dragon City's body, the remnants of the Immortal Dragon City suddenly shook violently. Rays of divine light rose from its body and pierced through the void. Then, the battlefield shattered like a broken mirror. It turned into fragments that filled the sky and merged into the Immortal Dragon City's body. In reality, there was no battlefield. Back then, the demon race had massacred the human race. In order to stop the advance of the demon race army, the human race experts had really given their all. They had burned their bodies and souls in exchange for a moment of invincibility. They had been able to stop the advance of the demon race slightly so that the human race behind them could have a chance to escape. After the great battle, all the human race experts had turned into ashes. Even their weapons were not left behind. How could there be a battlefield left? The truth of the battlefield was nothing more than the Immortal Dragon City's inability to forget the past. When it was on the verge of collapse, it had used its last bit of energy to project the battlefield. Now that the Immortal Dragon City had awakened, the battlefield was naturally useless. It turned into energy and returned to the Immortal Dragon City's body. Crack. As the battlefield shattered, Feng Zichen returned to the human emperor's palace. At this moment, he heard an earth-shattering dragon roar that reverberated through the entire eldritch universe. Roar. Amidst the dragon roar, a boundless divine dragon slowly appeared. Its gigantic body moved in the void, stirring up an endless storm, blowing away countless demons. Rumble. The divine dragon wriggled up and down, surrounding the human race's territory. Then, a divine light flashed and the divine dragon's figure disappeared. It was replaced by a winding great wall. It was vast and boundless, surrounding the entire human race's territory and protecting it firmly. It was like the most loyal warrior protecting its own people. Rumble. At the same time, the sky changed color. The will of the people Dao suddenly appeared, turning into endless divine light that supported the immortal dragon city. It looked even more majestic. The strength of the immortal dragon city was related to the human race's will. The stronger the human race's will to protect, the more powerful the immortal dragon city would be. In ancient times, the human race was far from being as prosperous as it was today. The immortal dragon city's power was comparable to that of the Daluo Taoist priests. Now that the human race's strength was much greater than that of ancient times, the immortal dragon city's power naturally rose with the tide. Although it still could not compare to a saint, it had reached the half-step primordial chaos level. Rumble. As soon as the immortal dragon city appeared, its vast power swept out, sweeping away the demon army that had charged into the human race's territory. The boundary of the 9 province was broken, and the immortal dragon city appeared. In an instant, the human race regained its stability. That's the immortal dragon city of the human race. I didn't expect that this treasure was not destroyed in ancient times. Instead, it was hidden by the North Star and only taken out now. Seeing the great wall that suddenly appeared outside the human race's territory, the saint's eyes narrowed slightly. He recognized its origin. In fact, he was not the only one. Every existence that paid attention to the demon race's massacre of humans in ancient times also recognized the origin of the immortal dragon city. After all, the groundbreaking feat of using one's will to refine a treasure was truly unforgettable. The North Star has so many trump cards. He used the immortal dragon city today, which reminded the poor way of something. In the later stages of the Great War between humans and demons, Tai used all his strength to seal a human city, the Imperial Court of Human Dao. That was also the place the North Star used to set up the Chaos Formation back then. Now that I think about it, it's probably also one of the North Star's trump cards. The Grand Pure One frowned as he looked at the restless dragon city. He seemed to have thought of something and said slowly. The Chaos Formation. Hearing this name, everyone's eyes narrowed involuntarily. The Imperial Court of Human Dao was nothing, but the Chaos Formation had left a deep impression on them. The Great Dao Divine Diagram, the endless connate divine light, the indomitable god-fiend phantoms that stood between heaven and earth, and the heavenly Dao's incarnation that made people tremble. They had never thought that, before the Chaos Formation appeared, no one had thought that there would be a formation that could directly summon the heavenly Dao's incarnation. Little did they know that when the Chaos Formation summoned the heavenly Dao's incarnation, everyone was shocked. It was also at that moment that everyone had an indelible impression of the Chaos Formation. At the same time, the Chaos Formation became one of the 3 great formations of the primordial world. Yes. That's right. There were 4 of the 3 great formations, just like the 4 heavenly kings had 5. This should be common knowledge. I almost forgot that the North Star still had this trump card. We really can't be careless when facing him. After coming back to his senses, the primordial Lord of Heaven said with some lingering fear. He really didn't think of the Chaos Formation. After all, the Imperial Court of Human Dao hadn't appeared in front of everyone for too long. It had long been forgotten by the world. Perhaps the news of the Imperial Court of Human Dao hasn't spread in the primordial world because the North Star deliberately blocked it. His goal was to wait for this moment. For some reason, Daoist Kundi thought. However, it didn't matter. Since they had noticed it in advance, they could make preparations early. the effect of the North Star's trump card would undoubtedly be greatly reduced. If they could still be tricked by the North Star under such circumstances, it could only be said that they were really too useless. It was also because Feng Zichen couldn't hear their thoughts. Otherwise, he would definitely laugh out loud. Feng Zichen wasn't surprised that the 5 saints could guess the Imperial Court of Human Tao. However, it would be strange if they could guess what was inside. There was nothing to look forward to in the Imperial Court of Human Tao. However, the humans inside were the surprise that Feng Zichen gave to the saints. They were also his greatest trump card. This was something that the saints would never have thought of. They would never have thought that there were millions of Tai Dao lords in the Imperial Court of Human Tao. Chapter 745. The saints would never have thought that Feng Zichen still had control of the passage to the Realm Sea. This huge difference in information was Feng Zichen's biggest advantage when facing the saints. In the human emperor's palace, after Feng Zichen awakened the immortal dragon city, he called Feng Zichen and instructed him, "Kangmeng, take my sword and go to the 5th manor of the Longevity Mountain to visit the great deity Jin Yuan." As he spoke, Feng Zichen took off the Zichen sword and handed it to Feng Kangmeng. "Your Majesty, what should I say after seeing the great deity Jin Yuan?" Feng Kangmeng asked doubtfully after receiving the Zichen sword. Even if he was going to visit him, there had to be a reason. He could not just run over carelessly. "After you see the great deity Jin Yuan, don't say anything. Just wait for me and say hello to him. Then, leave the Zichen sword behind and you can leave." Hearing this, Feng Zichen shook his head and continued to instruct. "Ah, this, I understand." Although he did not understand, Feng Kangmeng did not ask further. He bowed to Feng Zichen and hurriedly left for the Longevity Mountain. "Kuanpeng, your death is coming." Looking in the direction where Feng Kangmeng left, Feng Zichen said slowly. The purpose of letting Feng Kangmeng go to the Longevity Mountain to visit Zenyuanzi was naturally to use him to kill the great deity Kuanpeng. With the Great Tao Oath, it was naturally very easy for Feng Zichen to kill the great deity Kuanpeng. But why did he have to do it himself? Killing the great deity Kuanpeng directly was simple, but it could not maximize the benefits. However, if Zenyuanzi killed the great deity Kuanpeng, the result would be completely different. At this juncture, if Zenyuanzi killed the great deity Kuanpeng with the Zichen sword, he would not be able to explain his relationship with the human race even if he had mouths all over his body. They would definitely be classified as part of the human race by the saints and the other great divines. As long as Zenyuanzi killed Kuanpeng, he would be bound to the human tribe from now on. This was also Feng Zichen's goal. Not only did he kill ancestor Kuanpeng, a great enemy of the human race, but he also got Jin Yuanzi, a strong helper for the human race. As for why he chose Zenyuanzi and not others, it was naturally because Zenyuanzi and ancestor Kuanpeng had a blood feud. For this reason, Feng Zichen was not worried that Zenyuanzi would refuse. This might be Jin Yuanzi's only chance to kill ancestor Rock and avenge ancestor Hongyun. If Zenyuanzi missed this opportunity, he would never have the chance to kill Kuanpeng. Therefore, he could not refuse. Besides, even if Zenyuanzi refused, it didn't matter. Feng Zichen is such a shrewd person. Do you think Zenyuanzi will be fine if he refuses? That would be too naive. He had many ways to force Zenyuanzi to agree. Over the years, not many people who were targeted by Feng Zichen could escape from his hands. Feng Kangmeng was a Taoist priest who had attained Daluo's fruit of Tao. His speed was naturally extremely fast. Therefore, it did not take long for him to reach the vicinity of Longevity Mountain. When he was still some distance away from Longevity Mountain, Feng Kangmeng walked out of the void and changed to walk to 5th Manor Temple to show his respect to the ancestor of earthly immortals. In 5th Manor Temple, Zenyuanzi, who was in seclusion, suddenly opened his eyes. He called for 2 Taoist children and ordered, "Qing Feng, Mingyu, there is an important guest. Quickly go out and welcome him for me, so as not to be impolite." "Yes, master." As soon as he finished speaking, the 2 children walked out and bowed to Zenyuanzi. Then, they walked towards the door. It's strange. Why would the human emperor send someone to the poor way? Zenuanzi murmured to himself in confusion after the two had walked away. He did not understand why the human emperor sent someone to see him. Did he want him to get involved in this killing calamity? That was absolutely impossible. There were too many variables in this killing calamity, and people could not see the trajectory of its development. There was a faint tendency to evolve into a calamity that could destroy the world. He could not wait to avoid it. Why would he take the initiative to get involved? The human emperor should understand this. But why did he still send someone over? He really did not understand. Alas. The more he thought about it, the more worried Zenuanzi became. He knew what kind of character the human emperor was. He was afraid that he did not come with good intentions. This was troublesome. With his small arms and legs, he really did not want to get involved in the battle between the human emperor and the saint. Because he could not afford to offend either side. In fact, if it was only Feng Kangmang who came, Zenuanzi could totally refuse to see him. Zenuanzi was just a Tao master. Even if he was the messenger of the human clan, Zenuanzi did not want to see him, so Feng Zichen could not say anything. But from a distance, Zenuanzi could feel the emperor's aura on Zichen's sword, which was enough to shake the world. Obviously, Feng Kangmang came with the Zichen's sword. In this way, Zenuanzi could not refuse to see him. Because Feng Kangmang came with the Zichen's sword, which meant that he came on behalf of the human emperor. If Zenuanzi did not see him, he would be suspected of ignoring the human emperor. In this way, he would offend the human clan. So, he had to see him. That was also why Zenuanzi felt that he came with bad intentions. It was obviously not a good sign to come with a weapon in hand. I am Feng Kangmang of the human clan. Today, I come to see the great immortal Zenuanzi under the order of the human emperor. Please show yourself, Feng Kangmang shouted respectfully outside the 5 Villages temple. Squeak, as soon as he finished speaking, the gate of the 5 Villages temple opened from the inside, and 2 small figures walked out. Are you the distinguished guest that Master mentioned? Master is already waiting for you inside. Please go in and meet him. Looking up at Feng Kangmang and seeing that his cultivation was unfathomable, Qing Feng and Mingyu said. I don't dare to call myself a distinguished guest, but I do come to see the great immortal Zenuanzi. Since the great immortal has summoned me, please lead the way. Poor way, thank you. Even in the face of 2 Taoist children, Feng Kangmang was still very polite. These days, Taoist children were not to be trifled with. There was a saying that one should not bully a poor Taoist child. Look at Haotian of the Jade Pool, who was also a Taoist child. Now, not only was she the heavenly emperor and heavenly empress, but she could also wrestle with a sage. Her strength was not weak. They were the goal of all the Taoist children in the untainted land. Therefore, every Taoist child was a potential stock, especially the Taoist children of big shots. They were the most potential stock and could not be easily offended. Because you would never know how far they could grow in the future. Taoist priests, please come with us. Feng Kangmang could call them young friends, but Qing Feng and Mingyu did not dare to call a Taoist priest a Taoist friend. They respectfully guided Feng Kangmang to Zenuanzi's place. Since Zenuanzi said that Feng Kangmang was a distinguished guest, his status must be unspeakably high, far beyond their own. Qing Feng and Mingyu knew that. Under their guidance, Feng Kangmang soon saw Zenuanzi. Greetings, great immortal. I'm Feng Kangmang of the human tribe. Feng Kangmang respectfully saluted the moment he saw Zenuanzi. He had to be respectful. Zenuanzi was the ancestor of earthly immortals recognized by heaven and earth. He had great merits. Disrespecting him would shorten one's life. Zenuanzi nodded and asked, His Majesty asked you to see poor Wei. What's the matter? Hearing this, Feng Kangmang took off the Zichen sword, raised it above his head with both hands, and bowed to Zenuanzi. I'm here to greet the great immortal under the order of His Majesty, and to show this sword to you. Zichen's sword? Show it to poor Wei. Zenuanzi did not take the Zichen sword immediately, and asked in disbelief. Yes, is that what His Majesty said? Feng Kangmang said affirmatively, handing the Zichen sword forward. Let poor Wei see the Zichen sword. I wonder what the human emperor is up to. Puzzled, Zenuanzi took the Zichen sword from Feng Kangmang's hand and looked at it carefully, trying to figure out what the human emperor was up to. But at this glance, Zenuanzi could not help but narrow his eyes, and his face became serious. Because at the moment when the purple imperial sword was in his hand, Zenuanzi actually saw the scene of ancestor Kunpeng being killed by his sword from the purple imperial sword. But how could this be possible? He was clear about his own strength, and he was not clear about ancestor Kunpeng's strength, but he knew that ancestor Kunpeng was not much weaker than him, or even a little stronger. But no matter which possibility it was, it showed that he, Zenuanzi, might have the strength to defeat ancestor Kunpeng, but there was no possibility of killing him. But why did Zichen's sword show the scene of him killing ancestor Kunpeng? With Zenuanzi's strength, he could naturally distinguish between the real and the illusory. Therefore, he was very sure that the scene on Zichen's sword was not an illusion, but a scene from the future. That was to say, in the future, Zenuanzi killed ancestor Kunpeng with a sword. But this was impossible. For a moment, Zenuanzi's Taoist heart was in a mess, completely disturbed by the scene that suddenly appeared on Zichen's sword. After a long while, Zenuanzi came back to his senses and realized where the problem was. With his current strength, there was absolutely no possibility of killing ancestor Kunpeng. The problem was with the sword. And that sword was Zichen's sword. This meant that he, who originally did not have the ability to kill ancestor Kunpeng, had the strength to kill ancestor Kunpeng after picking up Zichen's sword. With this thought in mind, Zenuanzi looked at Zichen's sword again. However, at this moment, he looked more carefully, almost pouring all his mind into it. Boom through the layers of fog, in that trance, Zenuanzi seemed to see a transparent thread extending from Zichen's sword and falling on ancestor Kunpeng's body. This was the karma thread. It was this thread that gave Zichen's sword the ability to kill ancestor Kunpeng. That was to say, any powerful person, as long as he held Zichen's sword, had the ability to kill ancestor Kunpeng. This was given to Zichen's sword by Feng Zichen. Before Zichen's sword was taken out, Feng Zichen engraved his power of the Great Way on Zichen's sword, so that it had the ability to kill ancestor Kunpeng. That was not the karma of the Way of Heaven, but the karma of the Great Way. Ancestor Kunpeng had nowhere to hide, so he could only fulfill his oath. Of course, did you think that was the end? That was not impossible. If the karma of the Great Way could be erased so easily, then it did not deserve to be called the karma of the Great Way. The death of ancestor Kunpeng was not the end of everything, but the beginning of his suffering. The karma of the Great Way would always entangle him. Even if he returned from his sleep, it would still be attached to him. This meant that unless ancestor Kunpeng chose to abide by the agreement between himself and Feng Zichen, his life and death would always be in the hands of Feng Zichen. As long as he wanted, he could end ancestor Kunpeng's life at any time like now. Signing a contract with Feng Zichen was the beginning of the misfortune of ancestor Kunpeng's life. He had already been tied to Feng Zichen's ship, but he still did not know it. Holding Zichen's sword, Zenuanzi understood Feng Zichen's plan at the first time. He wanted to kill ancestor Kunpeng with his own hands, and take this opportunity to tie him to the human race. This was an open conspiracy without any concealment. Everything was clearly placed in front of Zenuanzi for him to choose. But could he refuse? Even if he knew that Feng Zichen had bad intentions, Zenuanzi could not refuse. As Feng Zichen had guessed before, this might be the only chance for Zenuanzi to kill ancestor Kunpeng. In order to take revenge, he had no choice. Putting away Zichen's sword, Zenuanzi turned to Feng Kangmang and said, "Poor Wei has understood the meaning of your emperor. Go back and tell him that Poor Wei has agreed." After that, Zenuanzi waved his hand and called Xing Feng and Mingyu. He ordered, "Go to the back garden and get 10 fruits. Give one of them to fellow Taoist Kangmang to quench his thirst. Let him take the remaining 9 and give them to the emperor as a thank you gift from Poor Wei." After that, Zenuanzi directly left with his hands behind his back. The whole process was done in one breath, leaving no chance for Feng Kangmang to reply. Fellow Taoists on Mount Kunlun, Poor Wei did not want to be your enemy, but you forced Poor Wei. Since you have chosen to cooperate with Kunpeng, you are destined to be the enemy of Poor Wei. Forget about the 3 pure ones, but the 2 Taoists in the West can also cooperate with Kunpeng so calmly. This is really infuriating. Do they really not care about fellow Taoist Hongyun at all? After all, fellow Daoist Hongyun was killed by that bastard Kunpeng. Not only did they not want to take revenge for fellow Taoist Hongyun, but now they are even talking and laughing with the murderer who killed her. They are really worse than beasts. In the depths of Wuzhuang Taoist Temple, where Zenyuanzi had set up clothes for ancestor Hongyun, came Zenyuanzi's angry scolding. After knowing that the sage had cooperated with ancestor Kunpeng, he was really angry. He kept cursing Jane and Zhuandi. At this moment, he had completely given up on the 2 of them and no longer had any hope. It was impossible to count on the 2 of them to resurrect fellow Taoist Hongyun in this life. Even until today, there was still no sign of ancestor Hongyun's return. This could be related to them, and they were secretly obstructing him. Chapter 746. Ancestor Red Cloud died in the middle of the Antiquity Age, when the sages had just attained Tao. Now, this era was about to pass. History was about to turn over and enter a brand new era. The Antiquity Age was about to become the Archean Age. How long had it been since the middle of the Antiquity Age? Tens of millions of years? Billions of years? Jin Yuanzi was not sure, but he knew that it was definitely an extremely long period of time. Even so, such a long period of time had passed. An entire era, but there was still no sign of ancestor Red Cloud returning. This was obviously illogical. Ancestor Red Cloud was not Di Jun, who had enemies all over the world. Even the sages were trying to stop his return. He only had Ancestor Rock and Ancestor Nether River as his enemies. The 2 of them did not have the ability to hide from Jin Yuanzi and stop Ancestor Red Cloud's return. Under such circumstances, Jin Yuanzi had worked hard for an entire era, but there was no result. Ancestor Red Cloud's real spirit was still dead. There was no sign of him returning. At this point, even if Jin Yuanzi did not want to believe it, he had to admit that there was someone stronger than him who was secretly stopping Ancestor Red Cloud's return. There were not many people stronger than Jin Yuanzi in the Eldritch world. The range was easy to pinpoint. There was an 80% chance that the sages were secretly involved. Among the 6 sages, Jin Yuanzi could not think of anyone else other than the 2 sages, Jin Yuanzi and Zhuan Ti. They owed Ancestor Red Cloud too much karma. They could either return Ancestor Red Cloud the position of a sage, or give him a primordial treasure each. This was the only way to end the karma between them. There was no other way. However, even if the 2 sages of the West were willing to pay such a price to repay Ancestor Red Cloud, they could not afford it. In order to get rid of this karma, the best way was to prevent Ancestor Red Cloud from ever returning. As long as Ancestor Red Cloud no longer existed, the karma would naturally cease to exist. Therefore, no matter how hard Jin Yuanzi tried, he could not revive Ancestor Red Cloud. The 2 sages of the West would not allow it. A long time ago, Jin Yuanzi thought of this possibility. However, he did not want to believe it or confirm it. Because, once he confirmed his guess, it would mean that Ancestor Red Cloud had no hope of returning. For the hope in his heart, Zenyuanzi chose to deceive himself, unwilling to accept the cruel truth. As time passed, the resurrection of Ancestor Hongyun became a knot in his heart. It had even dragged down his cultivation, causing his cultivation progress to be somewhat slow in recent years. Of course, if this knot could be untied, it meant that Zenyuanzi was not far from breaking through the realm of Daluo Jingxian. However, with Jin Yuanzi's power, it would be impossible for him to revive Ancestor Hongyun under the combined suppression of the 2 from the West. However, the appearance of Feng Zichen gave Zenyuanzi a chance to turn things around. First of all, Feng Zichen used Zichen's sword to tell Zenyuanzi that he had the ability to help him kill Ancestor Kunpeng and avenge Ancestor Hongyun. Secondly, Feng Zichen's arrival made Zenyuanzi see another possibility. The other possibility of reviving Ancestor Hongyun. Yes, it was true that he could not deal with the two Western saints alone, but he could also find help. Feng Zichen. This was Zenuanzi's best choice. After all, he was one of the few experts in the untainted land who could stand shoulder to shoulder with the sages. At the same time, like Zenuanzi, he had a blood feud with the two Western saints. Moreover, Feng Zichen's power was not weaker than the two Western saints. This was not Zenuanzi's guess, but Feng Zichen's real battle record. After all, he had fought against 3 sages by himself. If he could get the help of Feng Zichen, then the matter of Ancestor Hong Yun's return would be settled. That was why Zenuanzi chose to accept Zichen's sword. Otherwise, did he really think that Zenuanzi would sell himself to the human tribe just because of Ancestor Kunpeng's life? This was obviously impossible. In Zenuanzi's heart, killing Ancestor Kunpeng was not worth mentioning compared to reviving Ancestor Hong Yun. Killing Ancestor Kunpeng was of no use except to vent his anger. Zenuanzi was one of the few great mediums in the untainted land. He could not sell himself to the human tribe just to vent his anger. There must be a deeper reason. He wanted to borrow Feng Zichen's hand to revive Ancestor Hong Yun. He had already sold himself to the human tribe. Feng Zichen could not help him. Even if he did not want to help, he had to. Otherwise, who would dare to rely on the human tribe in the future? This time, Zenuanzi and Feng Zichen were using each other. However, overall, Feng Zichen had profited. After all, reviving Ancestor Hong Yun was part of his plan to deal with the two saints Zhuanti. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Zenuanzi, a future Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal of the Origin, was Feng Zichen's gain no matter how he looked at it. When Ancestor Hong Yun was revived in the future and Zenuanzi became the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian, the human tribe would have 2 more supreme beings. After that, if the 3 sovereigns also attained Dao, the scene would be TSK, 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 it would be spectacular. By then, the human tribe would have the capital to fight against the saints. They would be able to say no to the arrangements of the saints. This was what Feng Zichen was looking forward to. He firmly believed that the day would come soon. Zhuanti, Zhuanti, when Ancestor Hong Yun returns, poor Wei and Zhuanti will definitely settle the karma of all these years with you 2 brothers. After worshipping Ancestor Hong Yun again, Zenuanzi said with murderous intent. At this moment, with the change of his thoughts, the hatred in his heart for Zhuanti and Zhuanti could no longer be suppressed. Almost all of it surged out in an instant and surged in his heart. It was difficult to calm down, and it was difficult to calm down. Only the blood of the 2 could wash it away. Fortunately, the sage had lost the ability to deduce the divine mystery. Otherwise, Zenuanzi's current actions would have been sensed by the 2 sages, Janine and Zhuanti, and unknown troubles would have arisen. After a long time, Zenuanzi suppressed the murderous intent in his heart. Then, he carried Zichen's sword and went to the quiet room to cultivate in seclusion. This was the prelude to killing. In Zenuanzi's current state, it was not good to directly find trouble with Ancestor Kunpeng. Therefore, he had to go to the quiet room to meditate for a while to adjust his state of mind. In addition, revenge was a very sacred thing. He needed to make all the preparations and kill Ancestor Kunpeng at the best time. For example, on the day Ancestor Red Cloud fell. Killing Ancestor Kunpeng on this day was the final sacrifice to Ancestor Hong Yun. Your Majesty, Zichen's sword has been accepted by the Great Immortal. In addition, the Great Immortal asked me to tell Your Majesty that he has understood your intention and he agrees. In the Human Emperor Palace, Feng Kangmang, who had returned from Longevity Mountain, reported to Feng Zichen. At the same time, he did not forget to offer the 9 ginseng fruits. Oh yes, Your Majesty, these 9 ginseng fruits are a gift from the Great Immortal. Feng Kangmang took out the ginseng fruits that Qing Feng and Ming Yu had given him. Yes. You did well. You can keep the ginseng fruits. Or you can give them to whoever you like, or you can keep them for yourself. Anyway, just treat them as your reward for this task. Feng Zichen nodded and praised. As for the ginseng fruits, they were useless to him. He might as well give them to Feng Kangmang. Yes. After accepting the ginseng fruits, Feng Kangmang got up and left. Ancestor Kunpeng, let's see if you can die this time. Feng Zichen turned his head to look at the North Sea and sneered. At least 100 years, or at most 1,000 years, Ancestor Kunpeng would definitely die. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, 130 years had passed. And this day, according to the time in the heaven realm, was the death anniversary of Ancestor Hongyun. Boom! On Longevity Mountain, a violent wave suddenly rose, shaking the entire untainted land. Then, the ancestor of Earth immortals, Zenyuanzi, who had not moved for a long time, walked out of Longevity Mountain with a shocking murderous intent and headed toward the North Sea. Kunpeng, it's time for you to pay with your life for fellow Daoist Hongyun. His cold voice reverberated between heaven and earth, waking up countless great divine ability users from their stupor. That's Brother Zenyuanzi's voice. What is he doing? Is he going to attack Ancestor Kunpeng at this moment? After waking up from their seclusion, everyone looked in the direction of Longevity Mountain in shock and doubt. A battle of life and death between great mediums was not a small matter. Moreover, it was at this crucial moment. Ancestor Kunpeng had just received the support of the sage and was preparing to fight with the human emperor to seize the position of the Emperor of Earth. Now that he was full of himself, it was unwise for Zenyuanzi to choose to fight with him at this moment. In addition, during the cultivation tribulation, although it was the best time to take revenge, it was the first time that such a vendetta between great mediums had happened. It was beyond the scope, it was really beyond the scope. It was already a big deal that Daluo Jingxian was involved in the cultivation tribulation. But there were actually top great mediums in the world who took the initiative to enter the cultivation tribulation. What was he doing? Did he think that the situation was not chaotic enough and the power of the cultivation tribulation was not strong enough? Did he want to add fuel to the fire? At this moment, the most anxious ones should be the 5 sages on Kunlun Mountain. Zenyuanzi suddenly attacked Ancestor Kunpeng, which really caught them off guard. Why did Jin Yuanzi suddenly want to make a move against old Ancestor Kunpeng without any rhyme or reason? He had endured for countless years, why couldn't he bear it at this moment? Without the ability to deduce the mysteries of heaven, even the sages could not know everything. Therefore, they did not know that Feng Zichen had sent Feng Kangmang to Longevity Mountain. Damn it, we can't let fellow Taoist Zenyuanzi attack Kunpeng. Otherwise, whether we win or lose this battle, it will affect our plan. Saint Juandi said with a gloomy face. As long as Zenyuanzi attacked Kunpeng, Kunpeng would not be able to show up in a short time. How could a battle between great mediums of the same level be decided without hundreds or thousands of years? It would be even more difficult to determine life and death. Unless they had overwhelming strength, they could only rely on time to slowly wear them down. But at this critical moment when the demon clan was attacking the human clan, how could Ancestor Kunpeng not show up for a long time? It would not take many years. As long as Ancestor Kunpeng did not show up for 1,000 years, the morale of the North Sea demon clan would be completely destroyed. It would not be a matter of time before they were defeated by the human clan. Therefore, Zenyuanzi could not fight Ancestor Kunpeng, at least not now. Zenyuanzi was very popular in the untainted land. Therefore, seeing that he was stupid at this time and wanted to attack Kunpeng to destroy the saint's plan, everyone showed up to persuade him. Fellow Taoist Zenyuanzi, please think twice. It's unwise to fight Kunpeng now. That's right. Now that the general trend is with him, you'd better avoid him. In everyone's opinion, if Zenyuanzi went to kill Ancestor Kunpeng now, there was no other possibility other than asking for humiliation. Not to mention whether the saint would help, the hundreds of demon gods of the North Sea demon clan would join forces and attack Zenyuanzi together with Kunpeng. It would be enough for him to suffer. Everyone was worried that Zenyuanzi would fail to take revenge and lose face, so they persuaded him to go back. It could be seen that Zenyuanzi was very popular. If it were others, how could they persuade him? It was good enough that they did not laugh at him. Poor Wei appreciates your kindness, fellow Taoists. But to avenge fellow Taoist Hongyun has become my obsession. If I can't do it, I'm afraid that poor Wei won't be able to go any further. Therefore, fellow Taoists, please return. I have no room to turn back. Now, this is the only chance for poor Wei. If I miss it, I'm afraid there won't be a second chance. Zhen Yuanzi shook his head and said. How could he, who had made up his mind, be swayed by a few words from outsiders? Today, he had to kill Kunpeng. Alas! Seeing the firmness in Zhen Yuanzi's eyes, everyone knew that he had made up his mind. Therefore, they did not persuade him but followed him silently. They thought that with them following fellow Taoist Zhen Yuanzi, even if Kunpeng won, he would not dare to go too far. Anyway, with them here, fellow Taoist Zhen Yuanzi's life would be saved anyway. At most, he would lose some face, which should not be a big deal. Seeing the crowd following him silently, Zhen Yuanzi could not help but be moved. What was the spirit of brotherhood? This was it. It had to be said that Zhen Yuanzi knew how to conduct himself. They were all famous good people in the untainted land. When ancestor Hongyun was in danger, they chose to stand by and watch. When Zhen Yuanzi was in danger, they showed up one after another and stood by him silently. This was the difference in conduct. If Ancestor Red Cloud was half as capable as Zhen Yuanzi, then he would not have fallen into such a state. Seeing that the crowd did not persuade Zhen Yuanzi but followed him to the North Sea, the saint had no choice but to persuade him to go back. Fellow Taoist Zhen Yuanzi, please wait. Before he arrived, Saint Xuandi's voice came from afar. However, Zhen Yuanzi turned a deaf ear to his voice, as if he did not hear him at all, and continued to walk forward. Seeing that Zhen Yuanzi ignored him, Taoist Xuandi felt embarrassed and appeared in front of him in a flash. Chapter 747. Friend, it's been a long time. Please listen to the poor Wei. Taoist Kundi stopped Zhen Yuanzi and said with a smile. However, Zhen Yuanzi's cold eyes responded to him. Friend Kundi, are you here to join forces with the poor Wei to kill Kunpeng? Zhen Yuanzi asked as he stopped and stared at Saint Kundi. Hearing that, Saint Xuanti was immediately embarrassed. He did not know how to continue. What could he say? Could he say that he was here to stop Taoist Kundi from seeking revenge on Kunpeng? He really couldn't bring himself to say such words. He was in no position to say that. However, Saint Xuanti was embarrassed, but Zhen Yuanzi was not. He continued as if he did not see Saint Xuanti's expression. An era has passed. A whole era has passed. The poor Wei thought that Taoist Kundi had forgotten about Taoist Hongyun's hatred. I never expected that fellow Daoist would actually specially rush over to lend me a hand at this critical moment. It's truly moving. It seems that you have not forgotten about Taoist Hongyun's kindness in the Purple Cloud Palace. Well, since that's the case, let's join forces and kill Kunpeng to comfort Taoist Hongyun's soul in heaven. As he spoke, Zhen Yuanzi suddenly became excited as if he had been possessed by a drama queen. He stepped forward and grabbed Saint Xuanti's sleeve. Regardless of his pale face, he wanted to drag him to the North Sea. Next to Zhen Yuanzi, the great divinities who followed him all had strange expressions on their faces when they saw this scene. Brother Zhen Yuanzi said that on purpose, didn't he? He must be mocking Saint Kundi on purpose, mocking him for being ungrateful and biting the hand that fed him. After Zhen Yuanzi finished speaking, Saint Kundi's face turned pale. I can't leave, but I can't stay either. Although no one had discussed the matter between Ancestor Hongyun and the two sages of the West, most of them knew about it. They were not fools. How could they not understand that Ancestor Hongyun did not show any signs of returning? Someone must be behind this. Other than the two saints of the West, there was no one else who was behind this. Therefore, when everyone saw that Zhen Yuanzi was mocking Saint Xuanti, they were all watching a good show to observe Saint Xuanti's reaction. That expression was truly marvelous. At this moment, Saint Xuanti felt extremely embarrassed. Ever since he was born, he had never been so embarrassed. Even with his thick skin, he wished he could just cover his face and leave. Unfortunately, he could not leave. Because his sleeve was being pulled tightly by Zhen Yuanzi. He didn't know if Zhen Yuanzi did it on purpose. He pulled Zenuanzi's sleeves so tightly that Saint Juanti couldn't even pull them away. Of course, if he insisted on it, he could still do so. However, wouldn't that be even more awkward for Saint Juanti? Saint Juanti forced himself to calm down and said, "Fellow Taoist Zenuanzi, calm down first and listen to poor Wei." But Jin Yuanzi had finally gained the upper hand. How could he give him a chance to speak? Calm down for what? Today happens to be the death anniversary of fellow Taoist Hong Yun. The two of us, together with Saint Jiayin, can join forces to kill Kuan Peng today. It can be considered as completing the friendship between us and fellow Taoist Hong Yun. Zenuanzi approached Saint Juanti and said excitedly. This. Saint Juanti didn't know what to say after being blocked by Zenuanzi's words. However, at this time, Zenuanzi still didn't intend to let him go. Zenuanzi's expression changed, and he said in an extremely shocked tone, "Fellow Taoist Juanti, you, don't tell me you don't know that today is the death anniversary of fellow Taoist Hong Yun." As he spoke, a look of disbelief appeared on Zenuanzi's face at the right time. That expression was as if Saint Juanti had done something extremely evil. Ah, this is not the case. How could poor Wei not know the death anniversary of fellow Taoist Hong Yun? Every 10,000 years, poor Wei and senior brother will pay respects to fellow Taoist Hong Yun on this day. Saint Juanti's expression changed, and he said hurriedly. At this time, even if he had really forgotten, he couldn't say that he had forgotten. Otherwise, the two of them would be too ashamed to face anyone in the untainted land. To some extent, if they really admitted that they had forgotten the death anniversary of ancestor Hong Yun, the price would be more terrifying than exposing their identities as the descendants of the chaos demon god. It would be a complete social death. No matter who it was in the untainted land, they wouldn't bother to be associated with them. Even communicating with them would be regarded as a disgrace. After all, ancestor Hong Yun had helped the two of them attain the Tao. Back then, when he died, it was fine that they didn't save him. Now, after his fall, you have even forgotten the anniversary of his death. What did this mean? It meant that the two of them had never taken ancestor Hong Yun seriously. Oh my God. Even ancestor Hong Yun, who had helped them attain the Tao, was not worthy of their attention. Who else was worthy of their attention? How could they not be disgusted when they were so heartless? Oh, so you still remember. Zenuanzi pretended that he had misunderstood Zenuanzi, but in his heart, he was laughing coldly. Paying respects to ancestor Hong Yun every 10,000 years? That was ridiculous. They didn't even blink when they lied. If the two saints of Kundi had really done as they had said, ancestor Red Cloud would have returned from his deep slumber long ago. The sacrifice of a saint was no joke. The power it produced could be compared to Zenuanzi's hundreds or thousands of times. After all, the saints represented the heavenly way. If they took the initiative to pay respects to a person, it would be difficult for that person not to return. It could be seen that Saint Juanti was lying. They had never paid respects to ancestor Hong Yun. In Zenuanzi's opinion, it was true that the two saints of the West remembered the death anniversary of ancestor Hong Yun, and it was also true that they would pay respects to ancestor Hong Yun every 10,000 years. However, their purpose was definitely not to pay respects to ancestor Hong Yun, but to use their magical powers on that day to cut off the possibility of ancestor Hong Yun's return. The poison in their hearts was really chilling. At the side, the crowd watched Zenuanzi use his words to make fun of Saint Juanti, and they were amazed. This kind of battle of words was even more satisfying than watching a real battle. Cool, it was really cool. Especially when coupled with Saint Juanti's expression, it was simply too appetizing. Today was the first time in his life that Saint Juanti had been insulted the most. He could not even speak, and he could only respond passively. After insulting Saint Juanti, Zenuanzi only felt that all the anger in his heart had been vented, and he had a hearty pleasure. It was really comfortable. Then, perhaps because he had tasted the sweetness, Zenuanzi changed the topic and began to target Saint Juanin. Taoist Juanti, where is Taoist Juanin? Why didn't he come? How can he not be involved in the matter of avenging ancestor Hong Yun? If Taoist Juan Yin doesn't come, there will inevitably be unfavorable rumors about him in the untainted land. They will say that he is ungrateful. That's not good. Hearing that, Saint Juan Ti could not help but curl his lips in his heart. Rumors? Other than you, who else would dare to say those words? Wantonly talking about saints would shorten one's lifespan. That was what he thought, but Saint Juan Ti naturally could not say that. He said, "Senior brother is behind. He will be here soon." As soon as he finished speaking, the 3 pure ones and the 4 saints of Saint Juan Yin appeared in front of everyone. Although the 3 pure ones were also happy to see Saint Juan Yin, "Greetings, fellow Taoists and Yuanzi." The 4 saints stepped forward and bowed. "Greetings, fellow Taoists." Seeing this, Zhen Yuanzi returned the greeting. "Fellow Taoist, can you give face to poor Wei and the others? Let's leave first today and settle the score with fellow Taoist Kuan Peng another day." Without exchanging pleasantries, the Grand Pure One stepped forward and said directly. His words were not very clear, but the Grand Pure One knew that Zhen Yuanzi would definitely understand. As for the remaining 3 saints, although they did not say anything, they all stared at Zhen Yuanzi and waited for his answer. "Fellow Taoist, you do have a lot of face. If it were any other time, poor Wei would definitely retreat if you were to appear. However, today is the only day. Kuan Peng, poor Wei is definitely going to be killed. Therefore, I hope that the 5 of you will give poor Wei some face and make way." Facing the saint, Zhen Yuanzi still said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. At this moment, there was no longer the excitement on his face when he was refuting Saint Juan Ti. There was only determination on his face. Even the saints could not shake his determination to kill Kuan Peng. The Grand Pure One was silent for a while before asking, "Fellow Taoist, have you really made a decision?" "That's right. Today, either he dies or I die." Zhen Yuanzi nodded and said with a determined expression. With the Zichen sword in hand, he really had the confidence to kill Kuan Peng. "All right, take care, fellow Taoist." Seeing this, the Grand Pure One sighed and opened a path for Zhen Yuanzi to pass through. The Grand Pure One's face was indeed very big, but Zhen Yuanzi's face was undoubtedly bigger. Just based on the fact that he had protected the Eastern land for countless years by himself, all the Eastern living beings had to remember his kindness. Therefore, they had to give Zhen Yuanzi face, even if he was a saint. He insisted on going over to fight Kuan Peng. Although the saint was unwilling and puzzled, he had no choice but to let him go. In fact, if Zhen Yuanzi was unfortunately defeated by Kuan Peng, they would even go over to save him. Otherwise, the saliva of the 3,000 mortal guests of the Purple Cloud Palace could drown the 3 pure ones. And that was the face of the Earth Immortal Ancestor. Of course, that was also the reason why the 3 pure ones wanted to save face. They could not do anything shameless. Otherwise, if they really insisted on not letting Zhen Yuanzi go over, Zhen Yuanzi would have no choice but to return home. Juan Ti was not from the east, so he could stop them. However, after Zhen Yuanzi said those words, if they appeared again, they would really be too ashamed to face anyone. Tisk, ha. Zhen Yuanzi let out a carefree laugh, echoing clearly in everyone's ears. At this moment, Zhen Yuanzi was unusually arrogant. He sneered at the saints, but no one felt that it was wrong. The 2 saints who had received Ancestor Red Cloud's favor did not come forward to avenge him. However, Zhen Yuanzi, who had not received any favor from Ancestor Red Cloud, embarked on the road to avenge him for the friendship in his heart. The gap between them was clear at a glance. After this incident, the 2 saints, Juan Ti and Jane, would not be able to raise their heads in front of Zhen Yuanzi for the rest of their lives. This would become a shadow in their hearts. The more outstanding Zhen Yuanzi's performance was, the more despicable they were. After Zhen Yuanzi left, the 2 saints of the West's faces were so gloomy that it could drip water. Today, they had lost all their face in the untainted land again. Zhen Yuanzi. Clenching his fists, Saint Juan Ti remembered this name and sentenced him to death in his heart. Since you still can't forget fellow Taoist Red Cloud, the poor Wei will send you down to accompany him. Looking at Zhen Yuanzi's back view, Saint Juanti thought silently. The Longevity Mountain was very far from the North Sea. However, with Zenuanzi's speed, he could cross the endless void in one step and rush to the North Sea from the Longevity Mountain. However, he did not do so. Instead, he chose to walk step by step from the Longevity Mountain to the North Sea. Zenuanzi's actions were not without reason. He was accumulating strength, preparing to reach the peak of his aura before rushing to the North Sea. It was good that he could kill Ancestor Kuan-Peng in one strike during the battle, not giving anyone a chance to save him. In fact, it was said that he was walking to the North Sea step by step. However, how could a great medium be the same as an ordinary person when he took a step? Zenuanzi took a step and crossed the distance of thousands of rivers and mountains. In just 9 steps, he rushed from the Longevity Mountain to the North Sea. At the same time, the aura on his body had accumulated to the limit. Little Kuan-Peng, come out and die. Above the North Sea, the power that Zenuanzi had accumulated for a long time suddenly erupted, turning into a world-destroying storm that swept across the North Sea. Fellow Taoist Zenuanzi, you couldn't do anything to the poor Wei in ancient times. Now, you can't do anything to the poor Wei at all. Why come to the North Sea to humiliate yourself? A cold air emerged from the depths of the North Sea, freezing the world-destroying storm formed by the eruption of Zenuanzi's aura. Then, in the endless cold air, Ancestor Kuan-Peng walked over on the snow and appeared in front of Zenuanzi. Fellow Taoist, if you retreat now, the poor Wei will not care about today's matter with you. Compared to before, Ancestor Kuan-Peng was even younger. He no longer appeared in the face of a middle-aged man. Instead, he appeared in the world with a young face. A vigorous vitality was emitted from his body. Coupled with his young face, it made him look exceptionally heroic. This was Kuan-Peng. But it was not the Demon Master Kuan-Peng. It was the North Sea Demon Emperor Kuan-Peng. That's right. Before attacking the human race, Kuan-Peng had already been crowned as an emperor. He had changed from a demon master to a demon emperor. His young face. It was because of this that he was born. Chapter 748. When his mentality became younger, his body naturally became younger as well. At the same time, this also showed his ambition. Being young and full of vigor, it was the time for him to work hard. Restoring his youthful face showed his determination to dominate the world. He wanted to create another career. Looking at the high-spirited Ancestor Kuan-Peng, Zenuanzi calmed down instead of being excited. Go back. I'm afraid I can't do as you wish. Fellow Hongyun's revenge has been going on for many years since ancient times. Today, it's time to end it. Shaking his head, Zenuanzi said calmly. At this moment, Zenuanzi was really calm, so calm that he himself felt very surprised. He originally thought that he should be excited when he came to seek revenge on Patriarch Kuan-Peng this time. The pleasure of being able to take revenge would bring him heartfelt joy. But when he really came here, Zenuanzi's heart was not as turbulent as he thought before. Instead, it was full of calmness. Zenuanzi felt that his state was not right, but he could not tell whether it was good or bad. Because, in this calm state, although he had lost all kinds of emotions, he was closer to the Tao. Fellow Taoist, please go on your way. In this strange state, Zenuanzi tidied his clothes and slightly cupped his hands to Ancestor Kuan-Peng as a final farewell. Then, he slowly drew out the Zichen sword. The Zichen sword of the human emperor. Ancestor Kuan-Peng, who did not care much at first, could not help but raise his eyebrows and show a dignified look after seeing Zenuanzi take out the Zichen sword. Somehow, after seeing the Zichen sword, Ancestor Kuan-Peng suddenly had a bad premonition in his heart. But how could this be? Although the Zichen sword was strong, it was only an ultimate primordial spirit treasure, not a primordial treasure. How could it make him feel a sense of crisis? Although he was confused, Ancestor Kuan-Peng did not dare to be careless. He quietly summoned the Demon Master Palace to protect himself. Zichen sword. In the dark, the sage who followed Zenuanzi quietly understood why he wanted to take revenge on Ancestor Kuan-Peng at this time when he saw Zenuanzi take out the Zichen sword. Everything, this was all part of the Gaochun's scheme. For a moment, the saint subconsciously looked in the direction of the human ancestral land. In the human emperor palace, Feng Zichun seemed to have sensed something. He suddenly raised his head and smiled in the direction of the 5 saints. Fellow Taoists, this is my return gift to all of you for inviting Ancestor Kunpeng out. I wonder if all of you are satisfied? Feng Zichun said with a chuckle. That's right. It's the human sovereign Zichun sword. Raising the Zichun sword in his hand, Zhen Yuanzi said slowly, Fellow Taoist, it's time for us to put an end to this. With that, Zhen Yuanzi slashed out with his sword. There was no flash of sword light, no strange phenomenon, no fluctuation of the great Tao, and no trace of power. Zhen Yuanzi's slash was like a mortal wielding a sword, without the slightest ripple. After slashing out with his sword, Zhen Yuanzi did not have the slightest reluctance and directly turned to leave. Fellow Taoist Kunpeng, the karma between you and poor Wei is now over. Although he was far away, Zhen Yuanzi's voice floated over from afar. What happened? What's going on? What was the purpose of Brother Zhen Yuanzi's slash? Seeing Zhen Yuanzi turn around and leave after slashing out with his sword, everyone's eyes were full of confusion. Wasn't Zhen Yuanzi here to take revenge on Ancestor Kunpeng? But why did he leave after slashing out with his sword? Also, why did it sound like he had already killed Ancestor Kunpeng when he said that the karma had been settled? But wasn't Ancestor Kunpeng still standing there? Confused, everyone looked at Ancestor Kunpeng again, but after looking at him for a long time, they did not see anything wrong with him. In fact, not only them, but also Ancestor Kunpeng himself had some doubts. What did Zhen Yuanzi mean? Why did he leave just like that? Also, what was the meaning of his action of slashing out with his sword? At the same time, Ancestor Kunpeng did not forget to check his body to see if there were any hidden dangers. But after checking for a long time, he did not see any problems. Zhen Yuanzi, driven by curiosity, Ancestor Kunpeng wanted to catch up with Zhen Yuanzi and ask him the reason. However, just as he took a step forward, he stopped. Just now, he suddenly felt his heartstrings tremble violently. Then, he saw a bright sword light flash in front of his eyes, and then he did not know anything. Because he was already dead. The supreme master of a generation, the North Sea Demon Emperor who had dominated the untainted land for many years, the demon master of the demon clan, and Ancestor Kunpeng, had died so muddle-headedly. And until his death, he did not figure out how he died. Zhen Yuanzi only waved his sword gently. How could he kill him? Doubts and puzzlement filled Ancestor Kunpeng's heart. But his doubts and puzzlement were destined to be unanswered, and no one could answer them. Because he had already died. With the greatest doubts and puzzlement, he died silently. Fellow Taoist Kunpeng, what's wrong with you? Are you feeling unwell? Beside him, everyone saw that Ancestor Kunpeng was suddenly stunned and could not help but ask curiously. However, in the face of their questions, Ancestor Kunpeng was destined to be unable to answer. Fellow Taoist Kunpeng, fellow Taoist Kunpeng. Seeing that Ancestor Kunpeng did not respond, Tong Tian realized that something was wrong and quickly went forward to shout. While speaking, his hand had already been placed on Ancestor Kunpeng's body. However, the moment he touched Ancestor Kunpeng, his face suddenly became ugly. The Kunpeng patriarch had died, and he had died quietly in front of them. In addition, before the incident, no one noticed anything unusual. One had to know that more than half of the experts of the primordial world were gathered here, but even so, no one noticed anything unusual. This was extremely frightening to think about. It's the power of karma. Fellow Taoist Zhen Yuanzi's sword contained the power of karma. That's why he could kill fellow Taoist Kunpeng silently and directly destroy his true spirit. On the other side, the Grand Pure One hesitated for a long time before explaining the reason for Ancestor Kunpeng's death. However, although he said so, in his heart, there was still a trace of doubt. The power that killed Ancestor Kunpeng was indeed the power of karma. However, the power of karma was too strong. Not only did it easily kill an expert like Ancestor Kunpeng, but it also hid from their perception. Compared to the path of karma that the Grand Pure One was familiar with, it was really much stronger. If the power of karma was really so strong, there would not be so many conflicts in the world. The people of the world were afraid and naturally would not easily form karma with others. Naturally, there would be fewer conflicts. There was something wrong with the power of karma. Although he was suspicious, the Grand Pure One did not say it out loud. The power of karma? When everyone heard that, they released their spiritual senses and checked carefully. In the end, just as the Grand Pure One had said, they felt a slight karma fluctuation on Ancestor Kuan Peng's body. Hiss, how strong is the power of karma to be able to kill fellow Daoist Kuan Peng? After understanding the truth, everyone exclaimed. It was not that they did not know about the power of karma, but it was the first time they had seen such a strong power of karma. It was simply beyond their imagination. Since this method could kill Ancestor Kuan Peng, it could also kill them. Thinking of this, everyone could not help but fear Feng Zichen. They were all smart people. Naturally, everyone could see that the key to Zenyuanzi killing Ancestor Kuan Peng was Zichen's sword. Without Zichen's sword, Zenyuanzi would definitely not be able to kill Ancestor Kuan Peng with his strength. Human Emperor, what a good method. As they thought about it, everyone secretly decided in their hearts that unless they had no other choice, they would never form karma with the Human Emperor. The example of Ancestor Kuan Peng was right in front of them. They did not know what kind of karma Ancestor Kuan Peng had with the Human Emperor that he could use the power of karma to kill him. It was really terrifying. In the void, Feng Zichen walked in front of Zenyuanzi and asked with a smile, "Fellow Daoist, how does it feel to have your revenge?" After returning Zichen's sword to Feng Zichen, Zenyuanzi sighed and said, "Alas, the poor way is too persistent." After killing Ancestor Kuan Peng, he did not obtain the slightest pleasure. He only felt relieved. He had really been a little persistent these years. He should focus on reviving fellow Daoist Hong Yun. Why was he obsessed with the hatred between him and Kuan Peng? As for fellow Daoist Hong Yun's revenge, Zenyuanzi only needed to revive her and let her take revenge herself. When it came to taking revenge, it was obviously more satisfying to do it himself than to have someone else do it for him. Zenyuanzi had only figured this out after killing Kuan Peng. If he had figured it out earlier, he would not have been so tired these years. Ancestor Kuan Peng is dead, and only Sect Master Mingyi is left. Fellow Daoist, do you want to find trouble with him? If that's what you're thinking, then I don't mind lending you a hand. After putting away Zichen's sword, Feng Zichen said slowly. Ancestor Kuan Peng was not the only one who killed Ancestor Kuan Peng. There was also Ancestor Mingyi. It was the two of them who joined forces to kill Ancestor Kuan Peng. Otherwise, Ancestor Kuan Peng would have run away if he could not defeat them. No, the poor way has already accepted it. The life and death of Sect Master Mingyi will be decided after fellow Daoist Hong Yun returns in the future. Shaking his head, Zenyuanzi replied. Since coming to the North Sea, the knot in his heart had been untied, and his realm had also increased. The way he looked at things was obviously different from before. He had already touched the level of Dao, and looked at problems from the perspective of Dao. He was not far from the level of primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. When Ancestor Kuan Peng returned, he would completely untie the knot in his heart, and then he would be able to take the crucial step and be free. Fellow Daoist, it's good that you have thought it through. As for fellow Daoist Hong Yun, when the time is right, I will help. Seeing that Zenyuanzi had a breakthrough, Feng Zichen was very happy. After this, Zenyuanzi had become his ally. And the stronger his allies were, the more help they could bring to him. Then I thank you on behalf of Hong Yun. Hearing Feng Zichen's words, Zenyuanzi was completely relieved. With Feng Zichen's promise, it was only a matter of time before Ancestor Kuan Peng returned. Fellow Daoist, if there is nothing else, poor Wei will return to Wu Zhuangguan first. If you need anything, just let me know, and I'll come. Zenyuanzi bowed to Feng Zichen and said, if you need anything, just tell me and I'll come. Feng Zichen had no objection to this. Back at the Human Emperor Palace, Feng Zichen raised Zichen's sword and looked at it for a long time before he sighed with emotion. Under the Great Way, there is nowhere to escape, and nowhere to hide. Fellow Taoist Kuan-Peng, you are careless. After saying this, a familiar figure suddenly appeared on Zichen's sword. It was Ancestor Kuan-Peng. That's right, Ancestor Kuan-Peng was not dead. Because Feng Zichen did not intend to kill him. Ancestor Kuan-Peng was bound by the Great Way, and could only be Feng Zichen's ally in this life. Otherwise, his life and death would be controlled by Feng Zichen. It was still possible to break an oath of the Heavenly Way, but what about an oath of the Great Way? Forgive Feng Zichen for his ignorance, but he had never heard of anyone who could break an oath of the Heavenly Way. Even Pangu could not do it. In this case, this kind of ally who was destined to not betray was stronger than any other relationship. How could Feng Zichen bear to kill him? Therefore, Zenyuanzi's sword did not destroy his real spirit, but captured it. The owner of Zichen's sword was Feng Zichen. Even if it was held by Zenyuanzi, it still obeyed Feng Zichen's orders. Therefore, when Zenyuanzi waved his sword, Feng Zichen forcibly captured Ancestor Kuan-Peng's real spirit with the power of an oath of the Great Way, and created the illusion that his real spirit was broken. Yes, this time, poor Wei was really careless. I didn't expect you to have the ability to communicate with the Great Way and make an oath of the Great Way with poor Wei. Poor Wei is really convinced by this method. On Zichen's sword, Ancestor Kuan-Peng's real spirit said with a bitter smile. He really regretted it now. He should have thought of it earlier. When Feng Zichen gave him the runes of the Great Way furnace, he should have thought that Feng Zichen had a way to communicate with the Great Way. Otherwise, how did he get the runes of the Great Way? However, blinded by greed, Ancestor Kuan-Peng completely ignored this point, so he ended up like this. Alas! It was really too late to say anything now. He was at the mercy of others, and now he could only be at the mercy of others. How are you going to deal with poor Wei? Ancestor Kuan-Peng sighed as if he had accepted his fate and asked. Under the oath of the Great Way, he did not have the strength to resist Feng Zichen at all. He could only blame himself for breaking his original promise. This was the price he had to pay. Of course, if Ancestor Kuan-Peng chose to keep his promise, then his treatment would be different. He would be Feng Zi's guest of honor. Instead of being a prisoner now. It could only be said that sometimes, the choice was very important. The right choice. It would determine whether the future was brilliant.